Picture this. You are walking through one of the world's most famous sacred sites, maybe the Great Pyramids of Giza, or the stone circles of Stonehenge. You feel the weight of history around you, the presence of something ancient and meaningful. But what if I told you that the real story isn't above ground? What if the most profound secrets, the truths that rewrite history, are hidden just beneath your feet, deep below the surface, in places few ever see, lie intricate networks of tunnels, crypts, and chambers? These are not just architectural marvels, they are silent keepers of lost beliefs, forgotten rituals, and spiritual worldviews that have remained concealed for centuries. For as long as humans have sought meaning in the divine, we have also felt the need to create spaces set apart, spaces of secrecy, protection, and profound intimacy. These underground passageways served as stages for initiation rites, shelters during turmoil, and symbolic gateways to other realms. They were built with astonishing skill and profound intention, often at great cost, reflecting a universal human desire to connect with something greater than ourselves. In this video, we're going to explore 27 of these extraordinary subterranean sites, each one a time capsule preserving the spiritual imagination of past civilizations. From the echoing oracle chambers of Neolithic Malta to the sunken temples of Ethiopia, from the catacombs of Rome to the hidden cities of Cappadocia, we will journey across continents and millennia. What you are about to witness is more than a tour of ancient ruins. It is an invitation to see history from below, to step into the darkness and discover the light of human creativity, faith, and resilience. These passageways challenge our assumptions, reveal unexpected connections between cultures, and deepen our understanding of how belief shapes the world, both seen and unseen. So come with us as we descend into the depths, where every corridor holds a new mystery and every chamber tells a story waiting, at last, to be heard. This drive to build downward, to carve sanctity from the earth itself, is one of humanity's most enduring architectural impulses. Across countless cultures and eras, the subterranean world has been chosen as the setting for our most profound spiritual acts. Why dig when you could build upward toward the heavens? The reasons are as layered as the tunnels themselves. For many, the earth was not just a hiding place but a sacred realm, a direct connection to ancestral spirits, chthonic deities, and the very cycle of life and death. Building a temple underground was like building it within the body of a god, a place where the veil between worlds was whisper thin. These spaces provided unparalleled seclusion, essential for rituals meant only for the eyes of the initiated. In an age before locks and keys, the best way to protect sacred knowledge was to literally bury it, ensuring that mysteries remained mysterious. The engineering behind these projects is staggering, especially when we consider the tools available to their creators. We're not talking about simple holes in the ground. These are complex, multi-level structures with precise architectural features. Ancient builders had to solve incredible challenges, designing hidden entrances, creating stable ceilings to prevent collapse, engineering ventilation shafts for fresh air, and often channeling water sources for ritual use, all without modern technology. This wasn't mere excavation, it was a sophisticated form of architecture in reverse. The sheer effort required tells us that the motivation was about far more than practicality. It was an act of deep devotion, a physical manifestation of faith that could take generations to complete. The endurance needed for such projects suggests that these passageways were central, not peripheral, to the spiritual life of a community. Beyond their physical function, these underground networks served powerful symbolic purposes. descending into a dark tunnel is a universal metaphor for a journey into the unknown, facing one's fears, confronting mortality, and seeking rebirth. Many cultures viewed caves and underground chambers as the womb of the Earth Mother, a place where one could symbolically die to an old life and be reborn into a new, enlightened state. This transformative experience was central to initiation rites in traditions from the Eleusinian mysteries of ancient Greece to secret societies across the globe. Passageway itself became a spiritual map, guiding the initiate through a symbolic underworld and back again. This physical journey facilitated an internal one, making abstract beliefs tangible and unforgettable. As we turn our attention to specific sites, keep these universal themes in mind: the quest for protection, the power of secrecy, the metaphor of journey, and the human desire to touch the divine in the most intimate way possible. Each tunnel and chamber we explore is a unique expression of these shared human yearnings, a fingerprint of a culture's world, you left in stone and soil. Our journey into the depths begins not with pyramids or grand temples, but with a silent, sprawling complex hidden beneath the streets of Paola, Malta. The Hypogeum of Hal Saflani is a breathtaking underground labyrinth, a sanctuary entirely carved by hand from the island's Globigerina limestone over 5,000 years ago. This was not a project undertaken in a single lifetime. It represents centuries of continuous, sacred labor, a multi-generational act of devotion that resulted in 3 intricate levels descending over 30 feet into the earth. What strikes you first is the sheer ambition. This is not a simple cave or a single burial chamber. The Hypogeum is a meticulously planned architectural marvel, with a main entrance that opens into a vast central hall, which then branches off into a network of smaller chambers, elliptical rooms, and winding corridors, all connected by narrow staircases and short passages. The walls are smooth, the ceilings are carefully arched, and everywhere you look, there is evidence of sophisticated craftsmanship that defies our standard image of Stone Age societies. This was far more than a burial ground. It was a profound place of ritual, and its design reveals a culture deeply preoccupied with the journey from life to death and into whatever lies beyond. Archaeologists have uncovered the remains of over 7,000 individuals within its chambers, but the way these bodies were treated is what's truly fascinating. They appear to have been part of a complex excarnation process where the flesh was first removed from the bones, likely in a separate sacred space above ground, before the cleaned skeletal remains were carefully arranged in collective burials within the Hypogeum's oracle rooms and niches. This practice suggests a belief system that saw the body as a temporary vessel, with the bones representing the purified, eternal essence of the person. The act of communal burial, of mingling ancestors together in the sacred dark, points to a powerful concept of community that transcended individual death, binding the living and the dead together in a continuous cycle. But the most awe-inspiring feature of the Hypogeum is its manipulation of sound, an element that seems to have been central to the rituals performed there. The so-called oracle room is an acoustic masterpiece. This small, circular chamber has a unique property. A deep male voice, spoken or chanted into a specific niche in the wall, is amplified and distorted, creating a powerful, reverberating echo that seems to emanate from the walls and floor themselves, vibrating through your entire body. It's an experience that is both unsettling and profoundly moving. For a prehistoric people, this phenomenon would have been nothing short of magical. The very stones speaking back, the voice of an ancestor or a deity rising from the underworld. Researchers believe this was intentionally used in ceremonies to alter states of consciousness, to induce trances among participants, and to facilitate communication with the spiritual realm. The sound becomes a physical, tangible force, a key to unlocking non-ordinary reality. This mastery of both architecture and acoustics is coupled with a sophisticated understanding of the cosmos. The hypogeum is not randomly oriented. Certain chambers and passages are aligned so that on the equinoxes, beams of sunlight penetrate deep into the complex, illuminating specific carved spirals and patterns for a brief, dramatic moment. These spirals, a recurring motif throughout the site, are believed to symbolize the cycle of life, death, and rebirth, or perhaps a portal to another world. The combination of solar alignment, resonant sound, and symbolic art creates a multi-sensory ritual environment unparalleled in the ancient world. It forces us to completely rewrite our understanding of Neolithic capabilities. These were not primitive farmers, they were spiritual engineers, philosophers of the afterlife, and masters of their medium who used the very earth itself to construct a machine for transcendence, a place where one could literally hear the voice of the gods and witness the light of the sun touch the realm of the dead. Beneath the grandeur of St. Peter's Basilica, a world away from the echoing prayers and magnificent art above, lies a hidden city of the dead known as the Vatican Scavie, or excavations. This is not a single tunnel but an entire underground neighborhood, a preserved necropolis from ancient Roman times that was gradually, reverently, built over by the early Christian church. To walk through these narrow, dimly lit passageways is to take a step back through time, moving between ornately decorated pagan mausoleums and the humbler, yet profound Christian tombs that began to appear among them. The air is thick with history, every corner revealing a story of cultural and spiritual transition. This complex lay forgotten for over 1,000 years, sealed and protected beneath the weight of the later basilica, until systematic archaeological work in the 1940s began to carefully reveal its secrets, layer by delicate layer. What makes the Scavie so extraordinary is the visible dialogue between two worldviews captured in stone and plaster. On one side, you have the elaborate family tombs of wealthy Romans, their walls adorned with vibrant frescoes of mythological scenes, Dionysus with his grapes, Hercules with his club. These are expressions of a classical belief system, celebrating a pantheon of gods and a comfortable afterlife in the Elysian fields. Inscriptions on these tombs speak of love and loss in a distinctly Roman way, honoring ancestors and ensuring their memory. Then, nestled right beside them, sometimes even reusing the same structures, are the Christian burials. Their art is different, subtler, but no less powerful. Instead of mythological heroes, you find symbols: the fish, the anchor, the good shepherd carrying a lamb. These were coded messages of faith, a discreet language of hope and resurrection shared among a community that was often persecuted. The most significant discovery, and the heart of this underground complex, is a simple, unassuming monument that stands directly beneath the main altar of the basilica high above. Archaeologists found a small, 2nd century shrine built around a 1st century Roman tomb. Within that shrine, they discovered bones from an elderly, robust man, carefully wrapped in purple and gold cloth, an honorific treatment. The location aligns perfectly with ancient tradition, which for centuries had pointed to this exact spot as the final resting place of St. Peter, the apostle whom Catholics consider the first pope. While absolute scientific proof is elusive, the convergence of archaeological evidence, historical accounts, and the reverent treatment of the site makes a compelling case. This isn't just an artifact, it's a tangible link to the very foundations of the Christian faith, a physical connection to a figure who walked with Jesus. It shows how the early church, in establishing its identity, sought to root itself in the sanctity of a specific place and a specific person, building its most important basilica literally upon the rock of Peter. But the Scavie tells a broader story than just that of one tomb. It reveals a period of fascinating syncretism where old customs slowly took on new meanings. Pagan Romans used to hold ritual meals for the dead, called refrigeria, at the graveside. Early Christians adopted this practice but transformed it into the agape feast, a love feast commemorating the Last Supper and the resurrection. Evidence of these gatherings has been found here. This blending is visible in the artwork, too, where Christian symbols sometimes appear next to images of the sun god Sol Invictus, reflecting a period of spiritual searching and overlap. The necropolis was not abruptly Christianized. It was gradually transformed, with older traditions persisting in a new context. This underground labyrinth is a silent witness to the complex, messy, and deeply human process of how one belief system gradually gives way to another, not by erasing the past, but by building upon it, finding new sanctity in hallowed ground. While the Hypogeum and the Scavie speak to ancient rituals and early faith, our next destination reveals a much more recent and strikingly different relationship with the underworld. The story of the Paris catacombs begins not with spirituality, but with a public health crisis of staggering proportions. By the late 1700s, the cemeteries of Paris, particularly the massive Les Innocents in the city center, were horrifically overcrowded. For centuries, they had accepted the dead of nearly 24 parishes, with mass graves holding thousands of bodies at a time. The situation became intolerable. The soil was so saturated that it could no longer decompose bodies properly, leading to putrid conditions, the contamination of the local water supply, and even instances of basement walls adjacent to the cemetery collapsing under the pressure of the remains. The smell of decay was a constant presence in the neighborhood, and disease was rampant. The problem of the dead was literally overwhelming the living. In a move emblematic of the Enlightenment's growing emphasis on rationality, sanitation, and urban planning, the authorities decided on a drastic solution. Beginning in 1786, they commenced the enormous task of evacuating the cemeteries. Night after night, processions of black-veiled wagons carried millions of bones from the overflowing graves to a new, logical resting place, the abandoned limestone quarries that snaked for miles beneath the city's southern arrondissements. This was not an act of reverence in the traditional sense, but one of pragmatic civic engineering. The goal was to efficiently solve a problem, to tidy up death, and remove its physical threat from the daily life of the burgeoning modern city. For years, the bones were simply dumped into the cavernous spaces, a chaotic jumble of anonymous humanity. But then, something fascinating happened. Around 1810, the appointed inspector of the quarries, a man named Louis-Étienne Héricourt de Thury, undertook a project that would transform this grim repository into something entirely unique. He directed workers to arrange the bones and skulls not just for storage but for display. Walls of femurs and tibias were meticulously stacked, punctuated by lines of skulls creating macabre patterns. Pillars of bones were constructed to support the ceilings, and entire arches were built from skeletal remains. De Thury even added altars, monuments carved directly from the quarry rock, and placards bearing inscriptions. He wasn't just organizing, he was curating. He was creating an environment, turning a public works project into a profound, visitable memento mori, a reminder of death that was both philosophical and strangely beautiful. This artistic arrangement marks a pivotal cultural shift. The catacombs became a physical manifestation of a new, post-revolution attitude toward mortality. The Enlightenment had encouraged a more rational, scientific view of death, stripping it of some of its superstitious terror. The Romantic movement that followed reintroduced a fascination with death's melancholy beauty. The Paris catacombs sit at the intersection of these ideas. The inscriptions throughout the tunnels perfectly capture this spirit. One famously reads, Arret. C'est ici l'empire de la mort. Halt, this is the empire of death. Others carry reflective quotes from poets and philosophers about the equality of all people in death, the fleeting nature of earthly glory, and the inevitability of our shared fate. This is not a traditional sacred space dedicated to a specific deity or a hope for a specific afterlife. Instead, it is a secular sacred space, a monument to memory itself, and a forced meditation on the human condition. It reflects a belief system that sought to demystify death through reason while still acknowledging its powerful emotional and psychological weight. The artistry transforms the anonymous remains into a collective representation of humanity, forcing visitors to confront not individual lives lost, but the universal fact of mortality. The utility of solving a public health problem became deeply intertwined with a symbolic function, creating a space that is at once functional, artistic, and deeply philosophical. A silent, stone-lined conversation between the practical needs of the living and the silent presence of the dead. Now, let's journey from the ordered philosophical repose of Paris to a place where faith was not a quiet meditation but a matter of life and death, demanding not just contemplation but incredible ingenuity. Deep in the heart of Cappadocia, Turkey, a landscape already surreal with its fairy chimneys and wind-carved rock formations, lies one of the most astonishing architectural feats of the ancient world, the underground city of Derinkuyu. To call it a city is not an exaggeration. It is a veritable metropolis carved into the soft volcanic tuff, a labyrinthine world descending 18 stories and nearly 300 feet into the earth, capable of sheltering an estimated 20,000 people along with their livestock and supplies. This wasn't a temporary hideout. It was a self-sustaining fortress designed for communities to live entirely underground for months at a time, a breathtaking testament to human resilience and the desperate, powerful drive to protect a way of life. The construction of Derinkuyu is a marvel of underground engineering that would challenge modern builders even with today's technology. The entire complex is a masterpiece of strategic design, centered around a series of massive ventilation shafts, some as deep as 180 feet, which provided a constant supply of fresh air to even the lowest levels, completely negating the risk of suffocation or stale air that would have plagued a lesser design. An intricate network of narrow, twisting corridors connected the floors, each passageway equipped with a massive, rolling stone door, a single, monolithic disc of rock weighing up to half a ton. These doors could be rolled into place from the inside, perfectly sealing off entire sections of the city from invaders. They were impenetrable, the ultimate defensive measure. Beyond these doors lay an entire world, living quarters with rock-cut beds and shelves, spacious communal kitchens with grinding stones and hearths, stables for animals, wine and oil presses, storage rooms, and even chapels and schools. They dug wells that tapped into the underground water table to ensure a fresh supply, completely independent of the world above. But who would go to such extraordinary lengths, and why? The answer lies in a period of intense religious persecution. While the site's origins may stretch back to the Hittites or Phrygians, its most significant expansion and use began in the Byzantine era, particularly from the 7th to the 10th centuries. This was a time when the Eastern Roman Empire was locked in a brutal and recurring conflict with first Persian Sassanid armies and later Arab Islamic forces. For the region's Christian communities, these invasions were existential threats. Their faith made them targets. Derinkuyu was not built out of mere paranoia. It was a necessary, life-saving response to a very real and present danger. When scouts spotted dust clouds on the horizon signaling an approaching army, the entire population of the surrounding area would funnel into the city's hidden entrances. often concealed within the courtyards of surface homes or behind seemingly natural rock formations. They would roll the great stone doors shut and vanish from the face of the earth, leaving invaders above to find a seemingly empty, barren landscape. Within this hidden world, life and worship continued. This is where Derinkuyu transforms from a mere shelter into a profound sacred space. The Christians who built and inhabited this city did not see themselves as merely hiding. They saw themselves as preserving the light of their faith in the darkness, quite literally. They carved out numerous churches and chapels deep within the rock. These were not crude, hastily etched crosses. The cross church, for example, is a spacious basilica-style chapel with a high ceiling, nave, and apse, its walls adorned with beautifully incised crosses, geometric patterns, and even some faded frescoes. These spaces were where the community would gather for liturgy, prayer, and baptism, maintaining the rhythms of their spiritual life even during the most terrifying of times. The very act of worshipping in such a place surrounded by tons of rock must have felt powerfully symbolic, an echo of Christ's burial in the tomb and the hope of resurrection. Their faith was their reason for descending, and it was that same faith that sustained them, gave them the courage to carve this sanctuary, and provided the social cohesion necessary for thousands of people to live in such close, dark quarters for extended periods without descending into chaos. Derinkuyu stands as perhaps the ultimate example of a belief system physically manifesting itself for protection and preservation. It is a monument to the idea that community and faith are worth any amount of labor, any depth of excavation. It shows us that the sacred is not always found in soaring cathedrals reaching for the heavens. Sometimes it is found in the quiet, cool, protective embrace of the earth itself, a secret heart beating steadily beneath a world of turmoil, waiting for the moment it is safe to emerge once more into the light. From the vast communal refuge of Derinkuyu, we now shift to a much more recent, and in many ways more visceral, underground network, one where the struggle for survival was measured not in centuries but in days and hours. The Kai tunnels, located just outside what was once Saigon, are a stark testament to human endurance under the most extreme conditions imaginable. While they are rightfully famous for their crucial military role in the Vietnam War, to see them only as a battlefield fortification is to miss a deeper, more ancient layer of meaning woven into their very earth. This complex, which grew to span over 120 miles of interconnected passages, was not built in a cultural vacuum. It was constructed in a region steeped in spiritual traditions that have long viewed the land itself as a living, sacred entity. The Vietnamese worldview, shaped by a blend of Buddhism, Taoism, and deep-rooted indigenous ancestor worship, has always emphasized harmony with nature. The earth is not an inert resource to be exploited, but a mother, a provider, and a protector. For generations, villagers in this area had utilized the region's laterite clay soil, which is stable yet soft enough to carve, to create small underground storage spaces, family bomb shelters, and even hidden compartments for valuables. More significantly, many of the areas chosen for the massive tunnel expansion were already considered spiritually significant places near ancient village guardian temples, sacred groves, or burial grounds for revered ancestors. The Viet Cong soldiers and local supporters who dug these tunnels were not just engineers, they were part of this cultural continuum. By building within this hallowed ground, they were implicitly seeking the protection and blessing of the spirits of the land and their own forebears. They were turning to a primal source of strength in their time of greatest need. Life within the Kai tunnels was a descent into a special kind of hell, a claustrophobic, dark, and airless world plagued by insects, disease, and the constant threat of discovery and death. Yet even here, in the midst of unimaginable hardship, space was carved out for the spirit. Soldiers constructed small, hidden niches to serve as altars. These were not elaborate structures. Often, they were just a small recess in the tunnel wall holding a simple figurine of Buddha, a photograph of Ho Chi Minh as a secular saint, or perhaps a few sticks of incense. These spaces provided a crucial psychological anchor, a place for a moment of silent meditation, a prayer for protection, or a quiet remembrance of family left behind or comrades lost. It was a way to assert one's humanity and connect to a larger sense of purpose amidst the chaos and horror of guerrilla warfare. The act of prayer underground was a powerful reaffirmation of life and culture in the face of overwhelming forces aimed at its destruction. This seamless integration of the spiritual and the tactical is what makes the Ku Kai Tunnel such a compelling example. The same hands that built booby traps and weapon caches also built altars. The same tunnels that served as firing points and supply routes also served as spaces for contemplative retreat. This duality reflects a profound and resilient cultural logic, that practical survival and spiritual survival are not separate endeavors but are intrinsically linked. The earth provided physical cover from bombs and bullets, and in return it was honored as a sacred ally. This belief in the protective, nurturing quality of the underground is an ancient one in Vietnam, and the wartime use of the tunnels represents a powerful, modern adaptation of that deeply held principle. The tunnels are a physical manifestation of a people's unwavering will to preserve their way of life, drawing upon the deepest wells of their cultural and spiritual identity to endure. Leaving behind the cramped, wartime urgency of Ku Kai, we now ascend into the highlands of Ethiopia, to a place where the act of descending is not about hiding from the world, but about stepping into a new one entirely. Here in the rugged mountains lies the town of Lalibela, home to one of the most audacious and spiritually profound architectural projects in human history. Imagine not building up towards the heavens, but instead reaching down into the living rock to reveal a church, whole and complete, waiting in the earth. This is the miracle of Lalibela, 11 monolithic churches, each carved from a single, massive block of volcanic tuff in the 12th century, not constructed from the ground up, but excavated from the top down. The scale is almost incomprehensible. Architects and engineers today still marvel at the process, which involved first trenching deep into the rock to isolate a giant block, then painstakingly, artistically, hollowing it out to create an intricate interior of columns, arches, altars, and domes, all while carving the exterior into the shape of a cross or another sacred form. The result is a breathtaking sacred landscape, a complex of rock-hewn wonders connected by a network of deep trenches, narrow tunnels, and ceremonial passageways that feel less like man-made corridors and more like natural arteries within a living body of faith. This extraordinary endeavor was the vision of a king, Jeba Meskel Lalibela, of the Zagwe dynasty. The story, passed down through generations, tells of a divine inspiration. Following the capture of Jerusalem by Muslim forces in 1187, which made pilgrimage to the Holy Land incredibly difficult and dangerous for Ethiopian Christians, King Lalibela was instructed by God to build a new Jerusalem right there in the highlands of Roha, which would later take his name. This was not meant to be a mere symbolic replica. It was intended to be a functional substitute, a true spiritual successor that would allow pilgrims to complete their sacred journey without ever leaving Ethiopia. The entire layout of the site reflects this ambitious vision. The river that runs through the complex is named the River Jordan. The clusters of churches are divided into groups that symbolically represent earthly Jerusalem and heavenly Jerusalem. To walk through the deep, sunken courtyards and through the dark, connecting tunnels is to physically reenact a pilgrimage, to walk in the footsteps of Christ towards Golgotha, to experience the spiritual topography of the Holy Land through one's own movement. This is sacred geography made tangible, belief made into a landscape you can physically navigate. The artistry within each church deepens this immersive experience. Stepping inside from the bright African sun, your eyes adjust to the soft, filtered light to reveal walls covered in beautifully carved geometric patterns, ancient frescoes depicting biblical scenes, and iconic Ethiopian crosses of stunning complexity. This artwork is a powerful visual record of religious syncretism. You can see the clear influence of the ancient Aksumite Empire, the predecessor to the Ethiopian kingdom, in the architectural styles and symbols, blending seamlessly with the Orthodox Christian iconography imported from the Byzantine world. It's a unique fusion that created a distinctly Ethiopian expression of Christianity, one that has remained vibrant and unchanged for centuries. The churches are not museum pieces, they are living, breathing places of worship. Priests in white robes guard ancient treasures within their sanctuaries, thousand-year-old Bibles written on goat-skin parchment, heavy processional crosses worn smooth by centuries of touch, and the mysterious deuterers or scholar priests who chant hymns and prayers in a tradition that has echoed off these same rock walls for generations. The passageways connecting these churches are the veins that give this sacred body its life. They are not merely functional connectors, they are an integral part of the worship. During major religious festivals like Timkat Epiphany, thousands of pilgrims flow through these narrow tunnels and across the rock-hewn bridges in a great, slow-moving river of white shawls and murmured prayer. The physical act of moving through this subterranean network, from the darkness of a tunnel into the light of a church courtyard, becomes a powerful metaphor for the spiritual journey from sin to redemption, from ignorance to enlightenment. It fosters a profound sense of communal unity as everyone from the high priest to the humble farmer walks the same path, shares the same cramped space, and participates in the same physical ritual. Lalibela is the ultimate expression of how underground architecture can be used not for concealment, but for revelation. It doesn't hide its faith away. It plunges you directly into its heart, using the very earth itself to create an immersive, unforgettable experience of devotion that has drawn the faithful and the awestruck for over 800 years. Moving from the sunken rock-hewn churches of Ethiopia, we now venture deep into the humid, shadowy heart of the Yucatan Peninsula, to a place where the very air feels thick with ancient prayer. The Balanchay Cave is not a structure built by human hands, but a natural geological formation that the Maya saw as something far greater, a direct gateway to Xibalba, the fearsome and revered underworld. Unlike the constructed tunnels of Derinkuyu or the carved passages of Lalibela, this sacred space was discovered, not made. The Maya believed the earth itself was alive, punctured with openings to other realms, and caves like Balanchay were the most sacred of these portals. To descend into its depths was to undertake a perilous journey into the land of the gods and the dead, a place of both great danger and profound power, central to the very survival of their world. The cave's layout perfectly mirrors the Maya cosmological map. The entrance represents the surface of our world. As you move inward, the path slopes downward, taking you deeper into the underworld, through narrow, twisting passages that suddenly open into vast, cathedral-like chambers. In the largest of these chambers, the very heart of the sanctuary, the Maya priests performed their most vital rituals. At the center of the room stands a breathtaking natural formation, a massive, towering stalagmite that fuses seamlessly with a stalactite descending from the ceiling above, creating the powerful illusion of a giant ceiba tree made entirely of stone. For the Maya, the ceiba was the tree of life, its roots digging deep into Xibalba, its trunk on the earthly plane, and its branches holding up the heavens. This natural altar was the axis mundi, the literal center of the universe, and it was here that they communicated with the gods. The primary deity invoked here was Chok, the long-nosed, axe-wielding god of rain, lightning, and fertility. In the Yucatan, a land with no surface rivers, where survival depended entirely on seasonal rains and water filtering through the porous limestone into hidden sinkholes called cenotes, Chok was not a distant figure. He was the master of life and death. The ceremonies performed at the base of the stone tree were desperate, heartfelt negotiations for the most precious resource imaginable. Archaeologists have found the remains of these rituals perfectly preserved, beautiful, untouched ceramic vessels arrayed in a circular pattern around the central pillar. These were not simple water jars, they were intricate, lidded pots, many designed in the effigy of Chok himself, their surfaces still stained with the residue of offerings, perhaps vanilla, honey, or the blood of sacrificial offerings. The meticulous arrangement suggests a sacred choreography, a physical prayer for rain, for the renewal of the world, for balance, but the pleas to Chok were not silent. The cave itself became an instrument in these ceremonies. The acoustics in the main chamber are extraordinary. A single clap or spoken word resonates through the space, echoing off the wet walls and crystalline formations for an unnaturally long time, creating a disorienting and powerful auditory experience. Researchers believe priests used drums, flutes, and chanting to create a sonic environment that would alter consciousness, their voices seemingly amplified and distorted by the cave itself, making it feel as if the gods were truly answering. This was not mere superstition. It was a sophisticated understanding of how environment, psychology, and ritual combined to create a genuine transcendental experience. They were using every tool at their disposal, art, music, architecture, and geology, to bridge the gap between the human and the divine. The discoveries at Balanchay force a dramatic shift in how we view Maya civilization. For a long time, popular imagination focused on the grand surface achievements, the soaring pyramids, the vast ball courts, the intricate calendars. This cave reveals the intimate, hidden, and deeply spiritual engine that powered that society. It shows a world view where every aspect of the natural world was alive with meaning, where a drought was not a weather pattern but a broken covenant with the gods, and where the darkest, deepest places in the earth were not to be feared, but approached with reverence as the source of all life. The passageways of Balanchay were not for hiding or for refuge. They were for journeying, for reaching into the very core of existence to plead for, and to participate in, the eternal cycle of renewal that sustained their world. Now let's travel to the rose-red city of Petra, where the very rock seems to bleed with history, and the passageways are not just routes, but profound statements of faith and engineering genius. The Nabateans, that powerful and enigmatic civilization that controlled the lucrative spice trade routes, didn't simply build on their stunning desert landscape. They performed a kind of architectural alchemy upon it, turning entire mountainsides into facades and carving a hidden world of tunnels and channels deep within the stone. While the iconic treasury, or Al-Khosneh, is the famous face of Petra that captures every photograph, the true soul of the city lies in its less photographed but far more revealing subterranean networks. These were not mere service tunnels. They were the vital arteries of a civilization that understood its survival, and its sanctity depended on its mastery of one precious resource: water. In a region defined by its arid, unforgiving climate, the Nabateans' most astonishing achievement was not their grand tombs, but their hidden, sophisticated hydraulic system. They engineered a vast network of underground channels, clay pipelines, and massive cisterns carved directly into the bedrock, all designed to capture, control, and conserve every precious drop of seasonal rainwater. These tunnels snake through the mountains, channeling water from distant springs and from the wide, often dry riverbed of the Wadi Musa into enormous underground reservoirs that could sustain the city's population of perhaps 20,000 people and the countless caravan travelers through months of relentless drought. This was a matter of pure survival, but for the Nabateans it was also deeply sacred. Water was not just a physical resource, it was a divine gift, a symbol of life, purification, and blessing from their deities. The most important of these was the powerful goddess Al-Azhar, often associated with water and fertility, and Dashara, the supreme mountain god. By controlling water so masterfully, the Nabateans were not just practicing engineering, they were enacting a form of worship, mediating between the divine providence of the skies and the earthly needs of their people. The quiet, constant flow of water through those hidden channels was the lifeblood of the city and a continuous, whispered prayer. This sacred relationship with water is physically manifested in the most breathtaking approach to any ancient city in the world, the Sikh. This is not a man-made tunnel, but a natural geological fault that has been weathered over millennia into a narrow, winding canyon, in some places only 3 meters wide, with towering cliffs of swirling, rose-colored stone soaring 200 meters overhead. To call it a road is to utterly miss its point. The Nabateans deliberately chose and refined this natural corridor to serve as the primary processional way into their city, and in doing so, they transformed a simple journey into a profound spiritual experience. As you walk the nearly 1 kilometer length of the Sikh, the outside world gradually falls away. The light dims, the temperature drops, and the only sound is the echo of your own footsteps. The high walls are adorned with niches that once held sacred statues, and sections of the original water channel, carved from solid rock, still run along one side. The entire passage builds a powerful sense of anticipation, a slow, winding journey of preparation that heightens the senses and focuses the mind. It is a masterclass in architectural drama and spiritual theater. Then, at the very end of the Sikh, the canyon makes one final turn, and through a narrow slit in the rock, you catch your first, unforgettable glimpse, the intricately carved upper facade of the treasury, brilliantly illuminated by a sliver of sunlight. This dramatic reveal was absolutely intentional. For a Nabatean pilgrim or a wealthy caravan trader, this moment was the culmination of their journey. They had passed through the liminal space of the Sikh, a pathway that blurred the line between the natural and the man-made, the mundane and the divine, and were now confronted with a monument of impossible beauty, seemingly glowing from within the mountain itself. While we may see a tomb or a temple, they saw a testament to the power of their gods and the ingenuity of their king, a promise of protection and prosperity carved directly into the living rock. The treasury itself is riddled with internal chambers and a mysterious, sealed central doorway, suggesting that its true purpose, perhaps as a royal tomb or a ritual sanctuary, extended beyond the magnificent facade into spaces still not fully understood. Beyond the treasury, the passageways of Petra lead deeper into the city, to the street of facades with its rows of tomb entrances, and up the arduous climb to the monumental Ad-Der monastery. Each of these structures is connected by paths and tunnels that weave through the mountains, and many are adorned with carvings that offer glimpses into the Nabatean belief system. You can see eroded figures of the winged goddess Isis, symbolic camels leading souls to the afterlife, and abstract eye idols representing Dashara. These passageways were not just for the living, they were conceptual pathways for the dead, guiding the soul on its journey from the tomb to the afterlife. The entire city functioned as a massive, open-air cathedral, where the act of moving from one space to another, of transitioning from the bright sun into the cool dark of a carved tomb, was an integral part of religious practice. Petra stands as the ultimate expression of a civilization that saw no distinction between the practical and the spiritual, the natural and the engineered. They looked at a barren desert canyon and saw a sacred pathway. They looked at a mountain and saw a temple waiting to be revealed. They mastered the flow of water and in doing so, believed they were channeling the very flow of life itself. Beneath the iconic golden dome of the rock and the sprawling plaza of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, the earth is honeycombed with a hidden world of ancient passageways that form perhaps the most spiritually dense and politically sensitive underground network on the planet. This is not a single site with a single history, but a profound archaeological and theological palimpsest, where every stone seems to whisper a different name to a different faith. For Jews, these subterranean spaces are intimately bound to the very foundations of the Second Temple, the center of the ancient Jewish world. The Western Wall, so visible and revered today, is but a small exposed section of the massive retaining wall built by King Herod to level and expand the Temple Mount. The tunnels that run along its entire length, deep beneath the modern city, allow one to walk alongside the original, massive Herodian ashlars, stones so perfectly cut they fit together without mortar. Here you can stand mere feet from the foundation stone, the Even HaShetia, which Jewish tradition holds as the spiritual axis of creation, the place from which the world was woven into existence and upon which the Holy of Holies once stood. For the devout, these passageways are a tangible connection to the temple's rituals of purity and sacrifice, a place where the echoes of priests and pilgrims seem to linger in the cool, still air. For Christians, the same ground is sanctified by the footsteps of Jesus. The tunnels and vaulted chambers, particularly those near the southern and eastern walls, are associated with events in the New Testament. It is believed Jesus, as a devout Jew, would have walked these very stairways and tunnels to enter the temple precincts, to teach in its courts, and to overturn the tables of the money changers. The recently excavated and stunningly preserved ritual baths, or mikvayot, found in these underground areas illustrate the Jewish laws of purity that shaped daily life in Jerusalem during the Second Temple period, providing a powerful contextual backdrop for the Gospels. These submerged chambers make the biblical world immediately, physically real, connecting the faith to its Jewish roots in a profoundly concrete way. For Muslims who know the site as Al-Haram al-Sharif, or the Noble Sanctuary, the underground spaces hold a different but equally profound significance. Beneath the dome of the rock lies a remarkable cave known as the Well of Souls, or Bir al-Arwa. Islamic tradition suggests this is where the souls of the dead gather to hear prayers, and it is intimately connected to the Isra and Miraj, the night journey and ascension of the Prophet Muhammad. According to belief, the Prophet was transported from Mecca to this very spot by the mystical steed Burak before ascending to heaven to receive the command for the 5 daily prayers. While the Quran specifies only the farthest mosque, later interpretation firmly placed this event in Jerusalem, making the entire compound, including its subterranean features, the 3rd holiest site in Islam. The ancient cisterns and aqueducts that channel water beneath the platform are not just feats of engineering. They are part of a sacred infrastructure that purified worshippers for centuries. The archaeological narrative woven into these stones is a complex tapestry of competing and converging histories. Inscriptions in Greek, Latin, Hebrew, and Arabic have been found carved into walls or preserved on fragments of pottery, marking the presence of Roman soldiers, Byzantine pilgrims, Jewish builders, and Muslim custodians across the centuries. The discovery of a stone bearing a truncated Hebrew inscription, believed to be from the Second Temple warning Gentiles not to proceed further into the sacred precinct, is a powerful testament to the site's ancient Jewish character. Yet, directly alongside this history are the magnificent arched vaults from the Umayyad period, known as Solomon's Stables, which were later used by the Crusaders as a headquarters and stables, adding yet another layer of contested meaning. This incredible stratification isn't just a record of conflict, it is physical proof of continuous veneration, a series of civilizations each building its own sacred narrative literally upon the foundations of the last. The very tension that makes this place a flashpoint is also what makes it so unique, a single, sacred geography that holds in its underground embrace the deepest aspirations of three world faiths, demonstrating that their stories, however distinct, are forever and inextricably intertwined in the bedrock of Jerusalem. Descending the spiral staircase into the catacombs of Shakafa is like stepping into a vivid dream of the ancient world, a place where cultural boundaries blur and the afterlife is imagined through a uniquely cosmopolitan lens. The name itself, Shakafa, translates to Mound of Shards, a reference to the piles of pottery fragments left by visitors who would bring offerings of food and wine and then shatter the containers, a practice meant to prevent their reuse in a manner that might desecrate the sacred act of remembrance. This sprawling multi-level necropolis, accidentally discovered at the turn of the 20th century when a donkey cart literally fell through the ground into its central shaft, dates back to the 2nd century CE, a period when Alexandria was the dazzling intellectual and cultural capital of the Mediterranean, a melting pot where Egyptian, Greek, and Roman traditions collided and coalesced in something entirely new. The architecture of the site immediately announces its hybrid nature. You enter through a circular shaft, a design common in Roman tombs, but the method of excavation carved directly into the living rock is a profoundly Egyptian practice. The centerpiece is a breathtaking spiral staircase that corkscrews down into the gloom, wide enough to allow for funeral processions. This staircase wraps around a central well, which was not just for structural support but served a deeply practical and ritualistic purpose. Bodies would be lowered down this shaft on ropes to the different levels, a physical descent that mirrored the soul's journey to the underworld. As you descend, the air grows cool and heavy, and the walls, once brightly painted, tell a story of artistic fusion. The burial niches or loculi are arranged in the Roman style, but the decorative elements are a fascinating pastiche. You might see a fresco of the Greek goddess Medusa, her serpent hair writhing, acting as a protective apotropaic symbol, right beside a perfectly carved Egyptian ankh, the symbol of eternal life. This cultural conversation reaches its most striking expression in the main burial chamber. Here, the statues guarding the dead are a masterpiece of syncretic art. The figures are depicted in classic Roman attire, their bodies posed with the idealized realism of Greek sculpture, yet they bear the heads and symbols of Egyptian deities. The most famous of these is a stunning representation of the jackal-headed god Anubis, the traditional guardian of the necropolis and guide of souls. But this is not the familiar Anubis of the pharaohs. He is dressed not in simple linen but in the detailed, segmented plate armor of a Roman legionary, complete with a sword at his hip. He stands tall, a fusion of divine duty and imperial power. This image is more than just curious, it is a profound theological statement. It suggests that the people of Alexandria saw no contradiction in these identities. The Egyptian god of the dead could just as effectively perform his sacred duty while adopting the martial authority of the Roman world, offering a new kind of protection for a new kind of society. This blending extended beyond art into the very rituals performed within these underground halls. The catacombs include a triclinium, a Roman-style banquet hall with stone benches carved along the walls. This was not a somber place of silent mourning. Families would gather here for the refrigerium, a ceremonial funerary meal where they would feast in the presence of their ancestors, sharing food and drink to maintain a bond with the departed. This practice had roots in Roman tradition but was seamlessly integrated into the Alexandrian context, becoming a community event that celebrated the ongoing connection between the living and the dead. The act of sharing a meal underground was a powerful affirmation of life and continuity, a way for a diverse city to navigate the universal experience of mortality through a shared, hybrid set of customs that honored every part of its identity. Cam el Shakafa stands as a silent, stone testament to a rare moment in history where different belief systems didn't just tolerate each other, but actively intermingled, creating a rich, complex, and beautiful vision of what awaits us all. Leaving behind the Mediterranean fusion of Cam el Shakafa, we travel east to a site of such staggering ambition that it seems to defy the very limits of human possibility. Carved into the rugged Charanandri hills of India, the Elora Caves are not merely built into the earth. They represent a monumental act of reverse creation, a process of meticulous subtraction where generations of artisans started with a solid mountain of basalt rock and removed everything that was not a temple. This is architecture in its purest, most audacious form. Among the 34 monasteries and temples that make up this UNESCO World Heritage Site, one structure stands apart, not just in scale but in concept, the Kailasa Temple. Imagine the vision required to not build upward but to carve downward, to plan an entire, freestanding multi-story temple complex, complete with a central shrine, pillared halls, elaborate gateways, life-sized elephant sculptures, and soaring ceremonial towers, all from a single, continuous block of stone, and to do it all from the top down. The scale is almost incomprehensible. It is the largest single rock excavation in the ancient world, and the work was so extensive that archaeologists estimate over 200,000 tons of rock were painstakingly chiseled away, an endeavor that would have taken over a century of continuous labor. This was not construction, it was a form of sculptural revelation on a geological scale, an act of devotion so immense it sought to physically materialize a divine vision on earth. The Kailasa Temple is dedicated to Lord Shiva, and its very form is a profound piece of theological storytelling. It is designed to be a terrestrial replica of Mount Kailash in the Himalayas, the mythical abode of the god, believed to be the axis of the universe. Every aspect of its design, from the grand narrative friezes depicting scenes from the Ramayana and Mahabharata epics to the countless statues of deities and celestial beings, serves to illustrate the power and glory of Shiva and the Hindu cosmological vision. But the true spiritual heart of Kailasa, and indeed many of Elora's caves, lies not just in its grand open courtyards, but in the hidden, intimate spaces carved deep within the rock itself. Winding away from the main halls are narrow, dimly lit passageways and steep, hidden staircases that lead to small, secluded chambers. These were not for public worship. These were sanctuaries for initiates, for monks and ascetics who had moved beyond the external forms of ritual and sought a direct, unmediated experience of the divine. In the profound silence and utter darkness of these cells, far from the distractions of the world above, a practitioner could engage in deep meditation or dhyana, aiming to transcend the illusion of the material world and achieve enlightenment or moksha. The physical act of moving from the bright, crowded, sculpturally complex exterior into the simple, dark, and silent interior was a powerful metaphor for the spiritual journey inward, from the distraction of the senses to the quiet unity of the soul with the ultimate reality. This journey was enhanced by a masterful manipulation of the environment that shows an advanced understanding of human perception. The architects of Elora were acoustic engineers and masters of light. In certain caves, the dimensions and surface textures were precisely calculated to carry the sound of chanting or ritual bells in specific ways, creating a resonant, enveloping atmosphere that could elevate a ceremony and focus the mind. Similarly, they carved windows and light shafts at precise angles so that at particular times of the day or on specific days of the year, beams of sunlight would penetrate the deep darkness, dramatically illuminating a sacred statue or a carved symbol. A shaft of light might fall directly upon a statue of the Buddha delivering a sermon or upon a Shiva lingam at the precise moment of a daily prayer. This was not accidental. It was a sophisticated form of sacred theater, using the natural elements to create moments of awe and revelation, making the divine feel immanent and present. The play of light and shadow in these underground spaces became an active part of the worship, a dynamic interaction between the human, the architectural, and the cosmic. What makes Elora especially remarkable is that it is not a monument to a single faith. The complex includes 12 Buddhist caves, 17 Hindu caves, and 5 Jain caves, all built in close proximity between the 6th and 10th centuries. This side-by-side development suggests a period of extraordinary religious tolerance and cross-pollination. A devotee could walk from a cave featuring a serene, meditative statue of the Buddha to one pulsating with the dynamic energy of a carving of Shiva Nataraja, the Lord of the Dance, and then onto a Jain cave adorned with intricate depictions of the Tirthankaras, or enlightened teachers. The underground passageways of each tradition, while serving a similar purpose of providing seclusion, are rendered in distinct artistic styles and reflect different philosophical emphases. The Buddhist caves tend to feature large communal prayer halls or chaityas with stupas for circumambulation, emphasizing community and teachings. The Hindu caves are often more narrative, their walls teeming with mythological stories, emphasizing the epic scale of the cosmos. The Jain caves are characterized by an exquisite, almost hyper-detailed artistry, reflecting a focus on asceticism and precise non-violence. Together, they form a sprawling underground university of spirituality, a testament to a culture that believed the path to the sacred, though varied in its expression, ultimately led to the same truth, and that the quiet, focused darkness beneath the earth was the ideal classroom for the soul. High above the Valley of Mexico, the Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan has dominated the landscape for 2 millennia, its massive silhouette a timeless symbol of a mysterious and powerful civilization. For generations, archaeologists and visitors alike have focused their attention on its towering form, climbing its steep steps to stand at its summit and gaze out across the Avenue of the Dead. It was easy to assume that the pyramid's greatest secrets were there, in the open air, waiting to be understood. But the true heart of this monument, it turns out, was not pointing toward the sky, but was instead hidden deep within the earth, a secret it guarded for centuries. The real breakthrough in understanding this colossal structure came not from digging into its sides, but from looking straight down, using advanced technologies like ground-penetrating radar and muon detectors to peer through hundreds of feet of solid rock and earth without ever lifting a shovel. What they found was not just a foundation, but an entire hidden world, a complex network of chambers and tunnels running directly beneath the pyramid's core, a discovery that has completely rewritten the story of Teotihuacan and its profound spiritual beliefs. This subterranean system, accessed through a narrow, crumbling cave mouth located a short distance from the pyramid's base, descends into a carefully carved tunnel that runs for over 300 feet, ending in a clover-shaped chamber that sits almost directly beneath the pyramid's central point. The journey into this space is a physical descent into the underworld, a concept known throughout Mesoamerica as Tlalocan, the realm of the water god Tlaloc, a place of both life-giving abundance and fearful, chaotic power. For the Teotihuacanos, water was the ultimate source of life and the most potent symbol of creation itself. In a region where rainfall was seasonal and often unpredictable, the ability to summon and control water was synonymous with divine authority and the very survival of the city. The offerings found within these chambers are a direct reflection of this belief. Archaeologists have uncovered magnificent greenstone masks, finely carved beads of jade and serpentine, beautifully painted pottery vessels, and the skeletal remains of sacred animals like pumas and eagles, all carefully arranged as gifts to the gods of the deep earth. These were not casual donations, they were acts of profound negotiation, attempts to appease and harness the primordial forces that were believed to reside in these watery, subterranean realms, ensuring that the rains would come, the crops would grow, and the world would continue its cycle of renewal. The design of this underground complex reveals a cosmology of breathtaking sophistication, one that seamlessly wove together the earth and the heavens. The entire city of Teotihuacan is famously aligned with celestial phenomena. The Pyramid of the Sun itself is positioned to mark the sun's passage on key dates like August 12th and April 29th, which divided the solar year. But this alignment was not just an above-ground affair. The tunnel beneath the pyramid is not randomly oriented. It appears to be carefully calibrated. Some researchers suggest its path mirrors the movement of the sun or significant stars, creating a sacred axis mundi, a central world pillar that physically and symbolically connected the three layers of the cosmos: the watery underworld below, the human world on the surface, and the celestial realm of the gods above. The pyramid, then, was not just a mountain reaching for the sky. It was a plug, a stopper, a monumental anchor placed directly over the most powerful and volatile spiritual conduit in the entire valley. It was architecture as a binding force, a way to stabilize and channel the chaotic energies of creation for the benefit of the entire community. The most astonishing recent discoveries have come from a different tunnel, this one located beneath the Temple of the Feathered Serpent in the Ciudadela complex. Here, archaeologists led by Sergio Gomez discovered a veritable time capsule, a tunnel filled with an almost unimaginable wealth of ritual offerings. They found liquid mercury, representing sacred lakes or rivers of the underworld, hundreds of metal spheres that may have symbolized celestial bodies like planets or stars, and vast quantities of pyrite and magnetite, minerals that would have glittered like a starry night sky in the flickering light of a torch. Most remarkably, the walls of this tunnel were adorned with previously unknown murals, not in the bright colors typical of Teotihuacan's surface art, but rendered in finely applied metallic powders. These murals depicted landscapes and perhaps even maps of the underworld itself, providing a visual guide to the realm the priests were attempting to navigate and influence. This changes everything we thought we knew. It suggests that the most important rituals in Teotihuacan were not the large public spectacles held on the pyramid summits, but were instead intensely private, esoteric ceremonies conducted in the profound darkness beneath them, accessible only to a small, powerful priesthood who acted as intermediaries between the people and the raw, foundational powers of the universe. The hidden depths of Teotihuacan serve as a powerful reminder that our understanding of the ancient world is always provisional. A monument we thought we knew, one we have photographed and studied for over a century, can still hold its greatest secrets out of sight, waiting for the right technology and the right question to reveal a truth far more complex and beautiful than we ever imagined. The Pyramid of the Sun is no longer just a tomb or a temple to a forgotten sun god. It is the capstone on a profound spiritual engine, a machine for interacting with the very sources of life and creation, demonstrating that for the Teotihuacanos, true power and sacredness did not come from ascending to the heights, but from daring to descend into the mysterious, generative darkness below. Far to the north of the Mediterranean world, in the rolling green hills of France, another sacred site tells a story not of abrupt replacement, but of graceful, deliberate absorption. The soaring Gothic splendor of Chartres Cathedral, with its famous blue-stained glass and celestial architecture, is one of the most magnificent achievements of medieval Christendom. Yet to truly understand its power, one must look not up toward its vaulted ceilings, but down, beneath the massive stone pillars and the worn footsteps of millions of pilgrims, into the cool, dimly lit crypt that predates the entire structure above. This is not merely a foundation, it is a separate, ancient world, a spiritual seed from which the great cathedral grew. The most fascinating feature here is the Well of the Strong Saints, a deep, mysterious shaft that drops into the earth, surrounded by a labyrinthine passage that echoes with the whispers of countless prayers from a time long before the name of Christ was ever spoken in this region. The history of this site stretches back into the murky depths of the pre-Roman era, to a time when the Celtic Druids held sway in this part of Gaul. They identified this specific location as a place of immense spiritual power, primarily because of the sacred spring that welled up from the ground here. For the Druids, water sources like this were not just resources, they were portals to the otherworld, places where the veil between the physical and spiritual realms was thin, inhabited by deities and spirits who could offer healing, wisdom, and prophecy. It is believed they constructed a simple shrine here, a place of pilgrimage for those seeking the water's curative powers. When the Romans conquered the area, they continued the tradition, as was their common practice, building a temple over the Druidic site, likely dedicating it to a local mother goddess or a syncretic version of one of their own deities associated with healing and the earth. The spring continued to flow, its waters revered by generation after generation, its sanctity uninterrupted by changes in political or religious authority above ground. This deep, ingrained local veneration presented the early Christian missionaries with a fascinating dilemma when they arrived centuries later. They could have attempted to eradicate the pagan site, to demonize the spring and forbid its worship. But they chose a far more brilliant and strategic path. They sanctified it. They understood that faith often travels along well-worn paths, and the path to this sacred spring was ancient indeed. So they built their own church directly atop the pagan temple, and later the magnificent cathedral over that, but they did not seal off the spring. Instead, they incorporated it into their own Christian narrative, giving it a new name, the Puits des Saints Forts, or Well of the Strong Saints. According to the new legend, the first Christian martyrs of the region were thrown into this very well during Roman persecutions, and their heroic faith sanctified the waters, transforming them from a pagan curiosity into a Christian relic. The water itself didn't change, its story did. This was the genius of the medieval church's evangelization strategy. It didn't destroy local belief, it baptized it, weaving older traditions into a new Christian tapestry and providing a familiar doorway for converts to enter the new faith. This act of spiritual incorporation is physically etched into the very stones of the crypt. As you navigate the low, vaulted passages surrounding the well, you can see the evidence of this layered history. There are carved capitals on the columns that feature motifs which are not strictly biblical, alongside images of saints and apostles, you might find intricate patterns of foliage, mythical beasts, or geometric designs that feel older, more primal, echoing the artistic language of the pre-Christian world. The labyrinthine path pilgrims would walk to approach the well mirrors the famous labyrinth set into the floor of the cathedral nave above, a design that itself has roots in ancient pagan symbolism, representing a journey to the center of the self. Walking this underground path became a miniature pilgrimage, a symbolic descent into the underworld of one's own soul before seeking healing and redemption from the saints. The crypt became a place where a villager could come seeking a cure for an illness, dipping a cloth in the same waters their druidic ancestors might have, but now while praying to the Christian saints for intercession. The ritual action was comfortingly familiar. The object of devotion had gracefully shifted. Chartres Cathedral, in its breathtaking Gothic totality, is often held up as a symbol of a purely Christian Europe, a beacon of Orthodox faith. But its hidden crypt tells a more complex, more human, and ultimately more enduring story. It reveals that the great edifice of medieval Christianity was not built on a blank slate, but on a foundation of much older, deeply rooted beliefs. The Well of the Strong Saints is a powerful testament to the idea that religions do not simply replace one another. They evolve, they adapt, they converse with the past. The crypt serves as a perfect archive of this spiritual evolution, a place where the sacred water continues to flow, its meaning enriched by every generation that has knelt beside it, each seeing their own reflection and the face of their own God in its dark, still surface. While the massive columns and grand halls of the Hathor Temple at Dendera are a breathtaking testament to public Egyptian piety, the true engine of its spiritual power hummed quietly in the shadows, deep within the temple's very walls. Accessible only through cleverly concealed openings high up in the chapel walls or via hidden staircases known only to a chosen few, a network of narrow, low-ceilinged crypts snakes through the foundation and upper levels of the temple. To enter these spaces is to leave the sun-drenched world of public festival processions and step into the exclusive, secretive heart of the cult of Hathor. These were not burial chambers, they were the temple's most sacred storerooms and ritual workshops, the inner sanctum where the divine magic of the goddess was actively maintained by her highest priests, far from the eyes of the laity. The air here would have been thick with the smell of burning incense, sacred oils, and the faint, metallic scent of the revered objects stored within, a sensory experience reserved for the initiated. The walls of these cramped passageways are a silent library of forbidden knowledge, covered from floor to ceiling in intricate raised relief carvings that serve as a precise guidebook for the temple's most esoteric rituals. Unlike the more formal and static scenes in the public halls, these carvings feel vibrant and instructional. They depict priests carrying the sacred bark of the goddess during clandestine nightly ceremonies, presenting ritual vases, and adorning the cult statue with its divine regalia, the very daily routines that were believed to sustain the goddess's presence on earth and, by extension, maintain the cosmic order, or mat. One of the most significant scenes, found in a crypt on the temple's roof, shows the famous Dendera zodiac not as a simple chart, but as a complex map of the heavens used to calculate the precise timing of rituals based on the movements of stars and constellations. This wasn't decoration, it was functional, sacred technology, a series of instructions set in stone to ensure that every action performed in the dark below was in perfect harmony with the celestial dance above. This meticulous alignment with the cosmos is the defining feature of the Dendera crypts. Their construction was a feat of archaeoastronomical engineering. Specific tunnels and shafts were angled with incredible precision to capture the light of certain stars or the sun on mathematically significant days of the year. On the winter solstice, a beam of sunlight would pierce the darkness of a particular passage, illuminating a carved image of Hathor or a hieroglyphic text for a few fleeting minutes, transforming a simple sunbeam into a divine manifestation. This phenomenon turned the architecture itself into a participant in the ritual, a guaranteed sign from the gods that the priest's hidden work was effective and approved. It physically demonstrated their unique ability to not just observe the cosmos, but to harness its rhythms within the very fabric of the temple, proving their claims of acting as essential intermediaries between the human and the divine. The discoveries made within these sealed chambers have been equally revealing. Archaeologists have found the actual tools of this secret trade, delicate ritual instruments made of gold and faience, precious votive offerings kept safe from looters, and most importantly, cryptic texts inscribed on papyrus and pottery sherds. These texts provide the why behind the what shown in the carvings, offering incantations to be spoken, lists of ritual purity requirements, and detailed descriptions of the secret knowledge a priest needed to ascend the temple hierarchy. This access to hidden knowledge was the ultimate source of the priesthood's authority. By controlling the rituals, the sacred objects, and the timing of celestial events, they maintained a monopoly on the channels to the divine. The average Egyptian could worship at the outer courts and bring offerings, but only this elite group could perform the ceremonies that ensured the sun would rise, the Nile would flood, and life would continue. The Dendera crypts stand as a powerful testament to the fact that in ancient Egypt, spiritual power was not just about public display. It was deeply rooted in the strategic, calculated, and fiercely guarded control of secrecy, performed in the sacred dark beneath the feet of the worshippers they served. Returning to the astonishing underground cities of Cappadocia, we find that their story extends far beyond mere survival. Within the deepest, most secure levels of Kaymakli and Derinkuyu, the inhabitants carved out spaces not just for the body, but explicitly for the soul. Tucked away behind a final rolling stone door or at the end of a narrow, easily defended corridor, one can discover the heart of the community's resistance: small, intimate rock-cut churches. These were not the grand, domed basilicas of the Byzantine capital, but something far more powerful in its simplicity, a defiant whisper of faith in the overwhelming darkness. Their very existence is a profound statement. Even when forced to live like moles in the earth, these communities refused to live without God. The need for spiritual sustenance was as critical as the need for air, water, and bread, and the architecture of these hidden sanctuaries reveals a people determined to nourish every part of their humanity. The design of these underground chapels is a masterclass in adapting sacred space to extreme constraint. They are often small, with low, rounded ceilings that create a sense of intimate enclosure, almost like a womb. There are no grand processional aisles. The congregation would have gathered closely together, their shoulders touching, sharing body heat and breath, creating a powerful physical bond that mirrored their spiritual unity. The focal point was always a simple altar, hewn directly from the living rock, impossible to remove or desecrate. Beside it, small niches were carved into the walls to hold precious icons or to serve as a prothesis for the preparation of the Eucharistic elements. Every feature was multifunctional and essential. The limited space meant that every carving, every splash of paint had to carry immense symbolic weight. There was no room for superfluous decoration. Every element was intentional, every image a direct reflection of their deepest hopes and fears. It is on these walls that the most moving chapter of their story is told. The frescoes that adorn these secret chapels are a unique and beautiful blend of high Byzantine theology and local Anatolian folk art. Yes, you see the familiar, solemn faces of saints and apostles, rendered in the formal style of the imperial orthodoxy, their wide eyes gazing eternally upon the faithful. But alongside them, something else appears. The vibrant color palettes often feature bold reds, ochres, and blues that feel distinctly local, and the decorative motifs framing the sacred scenes sometimes incorporate patterns found on much older, pre-Christian Anatolian pottery. This was not a loss of orthodoxy, but rather its deep enculturation. The artists, likely working by the flickering light of oil lamps, were not slavishly copying codex illuminations. They were interpreting their faith through their own cultural lens, creating a visual language that was both universally Christian and intimately their own. The images they chose are particularly telling. Scenes of Christ's resurrection and the liberation of the righteous from Hades were especially popular, serving as powerful metaphors for their own desired deliverance from their underground captivity. Depictions of guardian angels and military saints like Saint George and Saint Theodore slaying dragons would have resonated deeply, representing their own daily struggle against the monstrous force of invasion that raged on the surface. These paintings were far more than decoration. They were a vital psychological and spiritual tool. In the perpetual twilight, surrounded by the oppressive weight of the earth, the brilliant blues of the Virgin's robe or the gold leaf halos would have shimmered with an otherworldly light. For a people deprived of the sun, these images became their windows to heaven. They were a constant visual reminder that their world was not defined by the narrow confines of their tunnels, but was part of a vast divine cosmos. Gathering in these chapels for the divine liturgy, the familiar chants echoing off the stone walls, the community would reaffirm their identity not as frightened refugees, but as the people of God, part of a timeless communion of saints that stretched across the empire and across the centuries. This regular practice of worship was the glue that held their society together, reinforcing social bonds, maintaining moral order, and providing the incredible psychological resilience needed to endure months or even years of confinement. The underground cities show us that faith is not a fair-weather comfort. It is in the darkest, most constrained environments that the human spirit often demonstrates its most creative and resilient expressions, carving out sanctuaries of hope from the very rock of despair. Beneath the magnificent vermilion walls and sweeping golden roofs of Beijing's Forbidden City, a place designed to be the absolute center of the earthly realm, lies a shadow counterpart, a hidden world of tunnels and chambers that served as the dynasty's secret circulatory system. While the world above was a meticulously staged theater of imperial power, with its vast courtyards, grand halls, and strict rituals all performed under the open sky, this underground network was the private, pragmatic, and profoundly spiritual engine that truly sustained the emperor's mandate. These were not crude escape routes alone. They were sacred pathways designed with the same cosmological precision as the palaces above, ensuring that the Son of Heaven could move not just safely, but in perfect harmony with the invisible forces of the universe. To understand these passageways is to understand the very heart of Chinese imperial ideology, where governance was not a secular duty but a sacred contract between heaven, earth, and man. The design and placement of every tunnel, every hidden door concealed behind a palace wall or disguised within a garden rockery, was governed by the ancient principles of Feng Shui. This was not mere superstition. It was a sophisticated system of geomancy aimed at optimizing the flow of Kai, or cosmic energy. The tunnels were often aligned along specific cardinal directions to harness beneficial energies and deflect malignant ones. Their geometries were never arbitrary. Curves and angles were calculated to prevent the straight, aggressive lines believed to carry harmful Shakai, or killing breath. The very act of moving through these subterranean corridors was thus a form of spiritual navigation. For the emperor, descending into this realm was not just a practical maneuver to avoid a court audience or a potential threat. It was a symbolic journey into the womb of the earth, a reaffirmation of his connection to the fundamental yin forces that balanced the yang-dominated world above. This hidden architecture ensured that even in secrecy, the emperor remained within a sacred, protected geometry, a living embodiment of cosmic order. Within this network, specific chambers were reserved for the most private and vital of rituals, while the great temples of heaven and earth hosted the massive public state ceremonies. The underground altars were for the emperor's personal communion with the forces that legitimized his rule. In these windowless, incense-heavy rooms, he would perform Taoist rites to align himself with the Tao, the fundamental principle of the universe, seeking longevity, wisdom, and harmony for his reign. Here, he might consult with trusted astrologers and priests, examining celestial charts to determine the most auspicious date for a military campaign or a royal wedding. Other spaces were dedicated to Confucian veneration, where the emperor would honor his ancestors in solitude, offering them reports on his stewardship and seeking their guidance. These rituals framed him not as an autocrat, but as the crucial pivot point in a vast hierarchical chain of being, the essential mediator who interpreted the will of heaven for the benefit of the people and reported the state of the people back to heaven. His authority was thus not merely political, it was a spiritual office of the highest order. The artifacts recovered from these spaces powerfully illustrate this dual role. Archaeologists have discovered exquisite bronze ritual vessels, similar to those used in above-ground temples but often of a more personal scale, inscribed with prayers for the dynasty's stability. Jade discs, symbols of heaven and imperial virtue, have been found placed in specific niches, likely as offerings to earth deities. Perhaps most telling are the inscribed tablets that emphasize the emperor's title as the Son of Heaven, a constant reminder that his every action, even those taken in the deepest secrecy, was undertaken as part of a celestial mandate. These objects were the tools of his sacred trade, used to maintain the delicate balance of the cosmos from the very foundation of his palace. The Forbidden City's hidden passages ultimately reveal a world where the spiritual and the strategic were inseparable. A tunnel that provided a physical escape route for the emperor in times of crisis also served as a metaphysical conduit for cosmic energy. A hidden chamber that offered a secret meeting place for his most trusted advisors also functioned as a sacred altar for ensuring their counsel was in alignment with the Tao. This integration shows that for the emperors of China, power was not just about controlling territory and people. It was about actively participating in and nurturing the fundamental order of existence itself. The underground network was the necessary hidden root system that supported the magnificent visible tree of state, ensuring that the empire remained rooted in the sacred and connected to the very source of its legitimacy. Leaving behind the imperial secrecy of Beijing, we journey now to a small town in the Czech Republic, to a site that represents perhaps the most direct and visceral confrontation with mortality ever conceived. The Sedlec Ossuary, located beneath the cemetery Church of All Saints, is not a hidden passageway in the traditional sense, but a descent into a realm where the boundary between the living and the dead is not just crossed but artistically dismantled. To step down into this underground chapel is to enter a space where the very medium of construction is human remains. The air is cool and still, and the first thing that strikes you is not a smell of decay, but an overwhelming silence, broken only by the hushed whispers of visitors who find themselves without adequate words. Then your eyes adjust to the dim light, and the reality of the place unfolds. Every surface, every decoration, Every astonishing central chandelier that hangs from the vaulted ceiling is meticulously crafted from thousands upon thousands of human bones. This is not a chaotic catacomb or a forgotten mass grave. It is a carefully, even lovingly arranged work of art, a Baroque masterpiece whose primary material is our own inevitable fate. The origin of this astonishing place begins not with a macabre artist, but with a very practical medieval problem. In the 13th century, an abbot returned from a journey to the Holy Land and sprinkled earth from Golgotha over the cemetery in Sedlec, instantly making it some of the most desired consecrated ground in all of Europe. For centuries, people from across the continent sought burial there, leading to massive overcrowding. By the 15th century, the Black Death and the Hussite Wars had flooded the cemetery with more bodies than the soil could possibly hold. The solution was an ancient one, the construction of an ossuary, a charnel house where the older bones could be exhumed and stored to make room for new burials. For generations, these bones were simply stacked in piles in the crypt below the church, a practical and respectful, if somber, solution to a logistical issue. They were out of sight, but they were not yet a sight to behold. The transformation from storage space to sacred art occurred in the 18th century, under the patronage of the aristocratic Schwarzenberg family. They tasked a local woodcarver, famously known only as František Rint, with the job of organizing the heaps of bones. What he created, however, was far beyond mere organization. Using the remains of an estimated 40,000 to 70,000 people, Rint and his team embarked on a project of breathtaking and unsettling creativity. They fashioned a gigantic chandelier in the center of the nave that contains at least one of every single bone in the human body, a mesmerizing and grotesque centerpiece that dominates the entire space. They constructed 4 massive bell-shaped mounds in each corner of the chapel, pyramids of skulls and femurs that reach nearly to the ceiling. They crafted intricate garlands of bones that drape from the vaults, a coat of arms of the Schwarzenberg family rendered in ribs and phalanges, and even a hauntingly elegant monstrance, a vessel typically used to display the consecrated host, here made entirely from skeletal parts. This was not desecration. It was, in the context of its time, the ultimate act of pious remembrance, a radical artistic statement forged from the most fundamental Christian theology. Sedlec is the supreme expression of the memento mori tradition, Latin for remember you must die, that permeated Baroque-era Europe. This was not a morbid obsession, but a spiritual exercise. The purpose was to provoke a specific series of thoughts in the viewer. First, a stark contemplation of one's own mortality and the vanity of earthly pursuits, and second, a hopeful meditation on the promise of Christian resurrection. The bones were not meant to horrify, but to remind. They were the great equalizer, showing that in death, the prince and the pauper, the knight and the commoner, were all reduced to the same essential materials. The incredible artistry applied to these materials then served as a symbol of hope. If a master craftsman could take these dry, anonymous bones and reassemble them into something of beauty and order, then how much more could God, the divine craftsman, reassemble these same souls at the end of time into glorious, resurrected bodies? The ossuary was a three-dimensional sermon, a physical manifestation of the core Christian belief that death is not an end, but a transition, a necessary dissolution before a glorious reconstitution. This creative approach forces a uniquely personal reflection. Gazing upon a pyramid of skulls, you inevitably find yourself looking for individuality, searching for a face in Chinese letter sockets, wondering about the lives that once animated these silent forms. The sheer scale anonymizes, yet the intimate detail, the chip in a tooth, the unique curve of a brow bone whispers of a singular person. it is both haunting and strangely enlightening. It does not inspire terror, but a profound and quiet humility. The Sedlec Ossuary stands as a powerful testament to the human capacity to stare directly into the abyss of our own oblivion and not just find meaning but create beauty. It demonstrates how the most daunting of practical necessities, what to do with our dead, can be transformed through belief into a profound spiritual statement, using the very substance of our mortality to point toward the hope of eternity. While the grand, dry stone walls of Great Zimbabwe rise impressively against the African sky, speaking of a powerful and sophisticated kingdom that flourished between the 11th and 15th centuries, a quieter, more enigmatic story lies hidden in the earth beneath them. Unlike the meticulously mapped catacombs of Rome or the vast, multi-level cities of Cappadocia, the subterranean features of this ancient Shona capital remain shrouded in a degree of mystery, partly due to the site's immense scale and partly due to the historical biases that have long shaped its exploration. Yet, the evidence that has emerged points to a complex underground world that was integral to the spiritual and political life of one of Africa's greatest medieval civilizations. These were not merely storage pits or functional tunnels. They were the hidden arteries of a belief system that saw the earth itself as a living, sacred entity, a realm where the human world interacted directly with the divine. The most compelling aspects of these subterranean spaces are the artifacts recovered from within them, which serve as silent but eloquent testimony to their purpose. Archaeologists have uncovered carefully arranged collections of ritual pottery, often distinct from everyday domestic ware, characterized by intricate patterning and symbols believed to hold spiritual significance. Alongside these vessels, tools made from iron and other materials have been found, not discarded as broken but placed with intention. These were not casual losses, they were deliberate deposits, offerings left in the earth. This practice aligns perfectly with core tenets of Shona cosmology, which places immense importance on maintaining a harmonious relationship with the ancestral spirits, known as Vadzimu, and a host of earth-based deities. The underground was seen as a conduit to these powerful forces. Rituals performed in these concealed chambers were likely pleas for fertility, both for the land to ensure bountiful harvests and for the people to guarantee the health and continuity of the community. The act of placing these objects underground was a way of feeding the earth, of giving back to the source of all life and seeking its continued blessing and protection. This spiritual function was inextricably linked to the consolidation of political power. The elite who ruled Great Zimbabwe, likely a dynasty of sacred kings known as Mwene Mutapa, would have understood that their authority was not merely secular. Their right to rule was divinely sanctioned, derived from their unique ability to intercede with the ancestral spirits on behalf of the entire population. Controlling access to these subterranean ritual spaces was therefore a powerful tool. By performing exclusive ceremonies in hidden chambers, perhaps located beneath the imposing stone enclosures of the hill complex where the royalty resided, they created an aura of mystical authority. The secrets of the rituals, the knowledge of how to communicate with the unseen world, became a form of sacred currency, reinforcing a social hierarchy where the elite held not just temporal power but spiritual monopoly. These passageways may have also served more practical, yet equally sensitive purposes, allowing for the discreet movement of priests and rulers between sacred spaces, or providing secure storage for the royal regalia and ritual objects that were the physical symbols of their divine mandate. The story of Great Zimbabwe's hidden dimensions is also a story of modern archaeology's evolving conscience. For decades, Western interpretations of the site were clouded by a reluctance to accept that such an advanced complex of stone architecture could be of indigenous African origin. Preposterous theories were advanced, attributing its construction to Phoenicians, Arabs, or even the Queen of Sheba, anything to avoid crediting the local Shona people. This racial bias meant that for a long time, the subtler aspects of the site, including its potential subterranean features, were either ignored, misinterpreted, or excavated with a disregard for their cultural context. The very act of now seriously investigating these underground spaces is part of a vital process of decolonizing archaeology. It involves listening to the oral histories of the Shona people, whose traditions have long spoken of the sacredness of the land, and integrating this indigenous knowledge with meticulous scientific investigation. It means moving beyond the awe-inspiring walls to ask what happened in the quiet, dark spaces below them, recognizing that the true heart of a culture's belief system is often found not in its most public displays, but in its most private, sacred acts of devotion. Re-examining Great Zimbabwe from this perspective allows us to finally see it not as a mysterious ruin left by foreigners, but as a profound and sophisticated African achievement, where every stone above ground was supported by a deep and enduring spiritual connection to the earth below. Across the emerald landscape of Ireland's Boyne Valley, a great grass-covered mound rises from the earth, looking for all the world like a sleeping giant. This is Newgrange, a passage tomb older than the pyramids of Giza and Stonehenge itself, a monument built by a Neolithic farming people over 5,000 years ago. Its most famous feature is not something you can see from the outside, but a phenomenon that occurs deep within, a fleeting moment of celestial magic that happens just once a year. Above the entrance, a small, square opening known as the roof box seems like a simple architectural detail, but it is in fact the key to one of the ancient world's most precise and profound astronomical alignments. For days around the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, a narrow beam of sunlight begins to pierce the pre-dawn darkness, penetrating through this specially designed aperture. As the sun crests the horizon, this beam transforms into a solid, golden shaft of light that travels slowly down the 60-foot-long, narrow passageway, reaching all the way into the central cruciform chamber at the very heart of the mound. For approximately 17 minutes, this inner sanctum, which has stood in total darkness for a full year, is brilliantly illuminated, the sunlight dramatically highlighting the intricate spirals and geometric patterns carved into the massive stones. Then, just as deliberately as it arrived, the light recedes, and the chamber is returned to darkness for another year. This was not a happy accident of construction. It was the entire magnificent point. The precision required to achieve this alignment speaks to a society with a deep, generational understanding of the skies. The builders of Newgrange were not primitive farmers. They were meticulous astronomers and master engineers. They had to observe the sun's shifting path for decades, perhaps even centuries, to pinpoint the exact azimuth of the winter solstice sunrise from that specific location in the valley. Then they had to design and construct a passage with a length and angle that would perfectly capture that specific sliver of light and channel it to the exact center of the chamber. The entire structure, with its complex corbelled vaulting that has kept the inner chamber waterproof for millennia, is a testament to their technical skill. But the technology served a purpose far greater than mere structural integrity. It was a mechanism for harnessing the sun, for demonstrating a tangible connection between their world of stone and soil and the great cyclical rhythms of the cosmos. In the deepest dark of the year, when the world seemed to be dying, they created a ceremony of light that guaranteed the sun's return and the rebirth of the land. This was the ultimate act of faith and hope, a communal prayer built not of words but of earth and rock and light. The meaning of this event is carved into the very stones of the chamber walls. The most prominent symbols are the great triskel-like triple spirals and the endless, looping serpentine lines that cover the orthostats or standing stones. These are not mere decoration. Many researchers believe these spirals represent a symbolic journey, a map of the soul's passage into the afterlife or through different states of consciousness. The repeating, non-linear patterns evoke concepts of eternity, cyclical rebirth, and the interconnectedness of all things, themes perfectly mirrored by the annual solar event. The light itself traveling down the dark passage can be seen as a metaphor for the soul's journey into the other world, or perhaps for the divine entering the realm of the dead. The central chamber, where the bones of the ancestors were carefully laid, becomes more than a tomb. It is a place of fusion where the life-giving power of the sun momentarily reunites with the departed, a dramatic reaffirmation that death is not an end but a part of an eternal cosmic cycle. This was almost certainly the setting for powerful communal rituals that wove together astronomy, ancestor veneration, and agriculture. We can imagine a select group of priests or elders, and perhaps representatives of the community, gathered in the cold, pre-dawn darkness within or outside the mound. As the first light began to penetrate the passage, it would have been a moment of incredible tension and then overwhelming catharsis. The arrival of the sunbeam would have been greeted not with quiet awe, but likely with chanting, drumming, or other ritualistic sounds, amplifying the spiritual power of the moment. This was not a solitary meditation but a public spectacle that reinforced social cohesion and the authority of a spiritual leadership that could seemingly command the sun itself. The ceremony would have served to bless the new year, honor the ancestors who are intimately tied to the fertility of the land, and ensure that the sun's strength would return to warm the soil for the next planting season. Newgrange stands as a timeless reminder that for our ancient ancestors, the sacred was not separate from the scientific or the practical. Their greatest architecture was a bridge between earth and sky, a permanent stone-calibrated clock that measured not just the passage of time, but the enduring human belief in renewal, connecting the community, their dead, and the very turning of the heavens in a single, brilliant, and unforgettable moment of light. Descending into the Basilica of San Clement is not like entering any other church in Rome. It is an act of time travel, a physical journey backward through the very bedrock of faith. You begin in the radiant, familiar world of a 12th century basilica, with its shimmering apse mosaic of the triumph of the cross glittering in the light. It is a beautiful, orthodox space, but the real mystery lies beneath your feet. A doorway in a quiet corner leads to a narrow staircase, and as you go down, the air grows cooler, the light dimmer, and the centuries begin to peel away like layers of an onion. You emerge not into a crypt, but into an entirely different, earlier church, a 4th century basilica with faded frescoes of early Christian saints and stories that feel ancient and raw. But the journey does not end there. Another staircase, even steeper and darker, descends further, and now the sound of the modern city fades completely. You have arrived in the 1st century, in the damp, low-ceilinged ruins of a Roman insula, an apartment building, and at its heart, something extraordinary. A perfectly preserved temple to the god Mithras, a Mithraeum hidden in the earth for nearly 2 millennia. This Mithraeum is the spiritual core of the entire complex, a window into a belief system that once fiercely competed with Christianity for the soul of Rome. The temple is a long, narrow, subterranean chamber designed to resemble the cave where Mithras was said to have slain the cosmic bull. It is an intimate, masculine space, dominated by a central aisle flanked by stone podiums where initiates would recline for a ritual meal. At the head of the chamber stands the iconic cult relief, carved from marble, depicting the god in his classic pose, a young, powerful Mithras, his face turned away, driving a dagger into the bull's neck, while a dog and a snake lap at the blood and a scorpion attacks the animal's genitals. To the modern eye, it is a violent, enigmatic image, but for its devotees, it was a scene of cosmic salvation. The spilled blood of the bull was believed to have fertilized the world, and the act symbolized the triumph of light over darkness, of order over chaos. This was a religion of secret initiation, exclusive to men, that promised its followers a path to ascend through 7 planetary grades of purity and eventually achieve salvation and unity with the divine. The air in this chamber would have been thick with the smoke of ritual fires and the chanting of prayers, a stark contrast to the open, communal worship developing in the Christian spaces above. The most compelling aspect of San Clement is not just that these layers exist, but how they interact. The 4th century Christian basilica was not built next to the Mithraeum. It was constructed directly on top of it, with its apse positioned almost precisely above the pagan altar. This was far more than a practical decision to reuse valuable urban land. It was a profound and deliberate act of theological conquest, a symbolic statement of triumph. By building their house of worship directly over that of their rival, the early Christians were physically demonstrating the supremacy of their new faith. They were burying the old gods quite literally under the foundation of the new, yet in a fascinating paradox they could not completely erase it. The very structure of their church was now dependent on the walls of the pagan temple below. The older belief, though suppressed, became the literal support for the new one, a hidden but essential part of its foundation. This creates a powerful metaphor for the nature of religious evolution. New beliefs do not emerge from a vacuum. They are built upon, and often in reaction to, the frameworks of the old. This vertical archaeology offers a tangible rebuttal to the idea of simple, clean religious transitions. History is not a series of distinct eras that neatly replace one another. Instead, it is a process of accumulation and adaptation. The Christian frescoes in the middle level themselves tell this story. One depicts the story of Saint Clement, the church's patron, who was martyred by being thrown into the Black Sea with an anchor around his neck. In the painting, the sea miraculously parts to reveal an underwater temple built by angels where Clement's body resides. It is impossible not to see a connection between this imagery of a sacred space hidden beneath the waves and the very real, physical reality of the Mithraic temple hidden beneath the artist's own feet. The past was not forgotten, it was unconsciously woven into the new mythology. San Clement stands as a monumental palimpsest. In the ancient world, a palimpsest was a parchment scraped clean and written over again, but on which the faint traces of the older writing often remained visible. This site is a spiritual palimpsest where the whispers of Mithras are still audible beneath the chants of the early Christians, which in turn echo below the polished Latin of the 12th century Mass. It is a permanent reminder that belief is a process of continuous rewriting, where every new layer of faith, however confident, never fully obscures the indelible traces of what came before. Beneath the crowded, incense-heavy air of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, a place revered as the very epicenter of the Christian faith, lies a world far older and more complex than the magnificent basilica that crowns it. This is not a single crypt but a sprawling, multi-level archaeological heart, a silent witness to 2,000 years of unwavering devotion, bitter conflict, and continuous reconstruction. While pilgrims above jostle to touch the stone of unction or enter the edicule, believed to house the tomb of Christ, a few narrow, seldom opened staircases lead down into a bedrock reality that tells an even richer story. Here, in the cool, dimly lit spaces known as the Chapel of St. Vartan and the newly excavated areas beyond, the walls themselves begin to speak, not in grand pronouncements, but in the intimate, scratchy language of ancient graffiti. This is where the raw, personal faith of countless generations is physically etched into the living stone of Jerusalem. The most breathtaking discovery in these lower chambers is a simple piece of rock that has radically altered our understanding of the site's early veneration. On a section of hewn stone, now protected behind a clear panel in the chapel of St. Vartan, is a crude but unmistakable etching. A small sailing ship with a pair of oars, accompanied by a brief Latin inscription that reads, Domine Ivimus, which translates to, Lord, we went. This is not random vandalism. It is a powerful pilgrimage signature from the Roman or early Byzantine era. The ship likely represents the vessel that carried the pilgrim across the Mediterranean, a perilous journey undertaken for the sake of faith. The phrase is a poignant echo of Psalm 122, which begins, I was glad when they said to me, let us go to the house of the Lord. This graffito, carved perhaps in the 4th century, is arguably one of the earliest tangible pieces of evidence for Christian pilgrimage to this site. It was made at a time when the Roman temple built over the spot had only recently been torn down by order of Emperor Constantine, and his mother Helena had begun the construction of the first great church. That pilgrim, standing amidst the rubble and initial construction, felt compelled to leave a permanent mark saying, I was here, I made this journey for my faith. It is a humbling connection across the centuries, a single voice from the multitude that has never ceased coming. These subterranean spaces also serve as a stark physical record of the complicated and often fractious sharing of this most sacred ground. The church is meticulously divided today among 6 major Christian denominations: Greek Orthodox, Roman Catholic, Armenian Orthodox, Syriac, Coptic, and Ethiopian, each controlling specific chapels, altars, and even times for procession. This intricate, fragile status quo is not a modern invention. It is the culmination of centuries of negotiation, dispute, and occasional violence, and the evidence is literally written on the walls below. As archaeologists have cleared more of the ancient foundations and quarries beneath the church, they have found layers of construction and modification. A wall built by one denomination to mark its territory in the 12th century might abut an altar fragment installed by another in the 6th. Inscriptions in Greek, Armenian, and Latin appear in close proximity, sometimes one carved right over the other, in a silent stone testimony to both the shared devotion and the constant competition for precedence and access. A sealed-off doorway might indicate a forgotten processional route used by one group before a rival faction blocked it to assert control. These are not merely architectural features. They are frozen moments in a long, slow dance of diplomacy and power struggles, all centered on the honor of guarding Christianity's holiest site. Perhaps the most profound revelation from these depths is the confirmation of the site's authenticity through the very scars of history. The church has been destroyed and rebuilt multiple times, sacked by Persians, demolished by a mad caliph, and damaged by fires and earthquakes. Each time, the faithful did not simply clear the rubble and start anew. They built directly on top of the ruins of the previous structure, using the rubble as a foundation. This means the current church floor is several meters above the original ground level of Jesus' time. As you descend into the crypts, you are walking down through these layers of destruction and rebirth, moving closer to the very ground that would have been familiar in the 1st century. Archaeologists have found evidence of the great retaining walls built by Emperor Constantine's engineers to level the area and create a flat platform for his basilica. They have even identified what they believe to be the remains of the original limestone quarry that existed outside the city walls at the time of the crucifixion, providing the topographical context that aligns with the biblical description of a place called Golgotha, or the skull. This continuous chain of construction, from the 1st century quarry to the Byzantine basilica to the Crusader church to the present building, does not obscure the past, it validates it. Each layer is a chapter in an unbroken story of reverence, a cumulative argument in stone that this place, despite all its changes and conflicts, has been identified as the site of the death and resurrection of Jesus since the very beginning of the Christian era. The passageways beneath the Holy Sepulchre are the ultimate archive, not of a static history, but of a living, breathing, and ever-evolving faith, physically embodied in the very rock upon which it stands. High atop a massive granite outcrop in the central plains of Sri Lanka, the Golden Temple of Dambulla appears not as a structure built upon the land, but as one grown from it. This is not a single building, but a sacred complex woven directly into the fabric of a 200-foot-high rock face, a series of 5 natural caverns that have been transformed over 2 millennia into one of the most pristine and enduring sites of Buddhist devotion in the entire world. To reach it, pilgrims and visitors alike must ascend a gentle, winding path, leaving the heat and noise of the modern world below. With each step, the mind begins to quiet, the focus turns inward, and the transition from the mundane to the sacred becomes a physical, intentional journey. The entrance to the caves feels less like walking into a man-made temple and more like being welcomed into a serene, stone embrace, a feeling that has drawn monks and seekers into its cool, dimly lit depths since even before the 1st century before the Common Era. The genius of Dambulla lies in its philosophy of enhancement rather than imposition. The architects and monks who developed this site understood that the natural caves themselves were already perfect vessels for spiritual practice. Their role was not to alter this divine geometry, but to adorn it, to elevate it with art that would guide the mind toward enlightenment. They constructed elegant arched colonnades and sweeping gables at the cave mouths to frame the entrances and protect the interiors from the elements, but they left the fundamental, organic shape of the caverns utterly intact. Inside, the atmosphere is immediately transformative. The air is cool and still, carrying a faint, ancient scent of incense, oil, and rock. The only sounds are the soft drip of percolating water, collected in cleverly designed pots for the monks' use, and the distant, rhythmic murmur of chanting. This is an environment meticulously crafted for one purpose: to facilitate the profound inner work of mindfulness and meditation, or bhavana, that is the core of the Theravada Buddhist practice. The solitude, the silence, and the separation from the world below create a natural laboratory for the mind, allowing a practitioner to observe the rise and fall of thoughts without distraction, and to cultivate a deep, unshakable state of present moment awareness. This inward journey is guided at every turn by one of the most spectacular collections of religious art on earth. The walls and ceilings of all 5 caves are a continuous, breathtaking tapestry of frescoes, with over 25,000 square feet of painted surface area. Far from being mere decoration, this art serves as a vibrant visual scripture. Vast sections are devoted to illustrating the Jataka tales, the hundreds of stories that recount the previous lives of the Buddha before his enlightenment. Here we see the future Buddha as a compassionate hare, a wise monkey, or a noble king, each story imparting a specific lesson on morality, self-sacrifice, and the law of karmic cause and effect. For a largely illiterate population across centuries, these paintings were the primary method of religious education, a divine comic strip of sorts that made complex philosophical concepts accessible and memorable. The ceilings, meanwhile, are adorned with intricate mandalas and cosmological diagrams, intricate maps of the Buddhist universe depicting various heavenly realms, hells, and the cycle of samsaric rebirth. Gazing upward, a devotee is reminded of the vastness of existence and the potential for liberation from its endless turning. The most powerful artworks, however, are the statues. Over 150 figures of the Buddha in various meditative poses, along with bodhisattvas and guardian deities, fill the caves. The largest is a colossal 46-foot-long statue of the Buddha in the parinirvana pose, representing his final passing into nirvana, a figure of such serene majesty that it inspires not sadness, but a profound sense of peace and the promise of ultimate release from suffering. The creation and upkeep of this sacred gallery is itself an act of devotion spanning centuries. The oldest caves bear the patronage of King Valagamba, who found refuge here during a 2nd century BCE invasion and later funded their development in gratitude. Subsequent kings from Anuradhapura and Kandy continued to add to and restore the artwork, with each layer of paint and gold leaf representing a king's piety, a monk's dedication, or an anonymous artist's offering for spiritual merit. The famous golden hue that gives the temple its modern name was added during the 18th century, a final, brilliant layer that seems to capture and amplify the dim light within the caves, making the entire space glow with a soft, ethereal luminescence. This continuous care illustrates a fundamental Buddhist principle that the preservation and beautification of a place of wisdom is a noble duty that benefits all beings. To be in these caves is to stand within a cumulative project of grace, a 2,000-year-long conversation between humanity and the divine, all dedicated to the singular, noble goal of awakening the mind to its true, boundless nature. Dambulla does not feel like a museum of a dead past. It is a living, breathing engine of spirituality, where the cool rock, the golden light, and the silent, watching Buddhas continue to offer a timeless sanctuary for anyone seeking respite from the storm of the world and a path toward inner peace. Perched high atop a sheer volcanic tuff cliff in the heart of Umbria, the medieval city of Orvieto presents an imposing silhouette against the Italian sky. To any approaching army throughout history, it must have seemed an impossible fortress, a sheer walled island of rock rising from the surrounding plains. But the city's true defensive genius wasn't just its lofty, inaccessible position. It was the vast, hidden world the citizens carved into the soft rock beneath their feet. This labyrinthine underworld, a network of over 1,200 tunnels, chambers, and galleries, is a stunning testament to a community's determination to survive against all odds, and reveals how the need for physical security is often inextricably woven with the deep human need for spiritual solace. The primary impetus for this immense subterranean project was, without question, sheer practicality. In an era of constant political upheaval and military threat, the cliff-top city was a natural refuge, but it had one critical vulnerability: a complete lack of a reliable, defensible water source. An army could simply lay siege and wait for the city above to die of thirst. The solution was one of the most ambitious civic engineering projects of the Renaissance, the staggering Pozzo di San Patrizio, or St. Patrick's Well. Commissioned by Pope Clement VII in the 16th century after he took refuge in Orvieto during the sack of Rome, the well is a breathtaking spiral into the earth. Two separate helical staircases, one for descending and one for ascending, corkscrew down 250 feet through the solid rock, designed so that donkeys could carry water skins up and down without ever meeting. The sheer scale of the excavation is humbling, a monument to human ingenuity in the face of existential threat. But even this marvel of engineering had a spiritual dimension. The well's name, linking it to the legendary St. Patrick's Purgatory in Ireland, a mythical cave thought to be an entrance to the underworld, transforms it from a mere water source into a symbolic gateway. It's easy to imagine citizens, while drawing water, also tossing in a small coin or offering a silent prayer to the saints, linking the life-giving water to divine favor and protection. Access to water wasn't just a utility, it was a daily reminder of a fragile covenant between the people, their city, and the divine forces they believed watched over them. Beyond these grand civic works, countless families and religious orders carved their own private refuges and cellars into the rock. During times of siege, the entire population could virtually vanish from the surface, living for weeks in these cool, dark spaces. But they did not descend into mere holes in the ground. They brought their world and their faith with them. In the deepest, most secure sections of this network, they carved out small, intimate chapels. These were not the grand, soaring cathedrals of the surface world, but humble, powerfully sincere spaces for prayer. The walls of these underground sanctuaries were often adorned with beautiful, if simple, 14th-century frescoes. The images chosen were telling, frequently depictions of protective saints like Saint Catherine of Alexandria or Saint Sebastian, or serene Madonnas offering compassion. In the flickering light of an oil lamp, these paintings were not just art, they were a visual plea and a comfort for families huddled in the dark, listening to the distant sounds of conflict above. These images provided a focal point for their fear and their hope. The act of prayer in such a space was an active defiance of despair, a way to assert that even in the deepest darkness, their community was still under the watchful eyes of heaven. This blending of the practical and the sacred reaches back even further than the medieval era to the city's earliest inhabitants, the Etruscans. Long before the popes and the Duomo, the Etruscans recognized the strategic value of this plateau and began the first excavations. Their tunnels and cisterns form the ancient foundation upon which the later medieval network was built. For this mysterious civilization, caves and underground spaces were deeply connected to their religious beliefs about the afterlife and divination. They saw the earth itself as sacred, a realm filled with omens and passages to the underworld. The later Christian inhabitants of Orvieto, perhaps without even fully realizing it, were walking in the footsteps of a much older tradition that viewed the subterranean world as a place of both refuge and revelation. The very rock that protected their bodies also seemed to hold an innate, ancient sanctity, making it the perfect place to seek protection for their souls. Orvieto's hidden world is a perfect, multi-layered example of a theme we've seen across the globe, that when humanity goes underground, we never go just to hide. We go to preserve, to pray, and to connect with something greater than the immediate threat, transforming our shelters into sanctuaries and ensuring that survival always includes the life of the spirit. But the true purpose of these giants has always been a subject of intense debate, a mystery carved from stone and silence. For generations, the prevailing narrative focused on what was visible, the statues themselves, the quarries where they were born, and the Ahu platforms upon which they stand. The story told was one of ecological collapse, of a society so consumed by its competitive statue building that it doomed itself, chopping down every last tree to move these stone giants until the island was barren and its people starving. It was a powerful cautionary tale, but it was also an incomplete one, a story told only from the surface down. It largely ignored the spiritual engine that drove this incredible endeavor, treating the Moai as merely the products of a runaway cultural vanity, rather than as the most visible part of a much deeper, more complex belief system. This surface-level interpretation left a crucial question unanswered. Why would a people facing such extreme isolation and resource constraints dedicate such staggering effort to this single, overwhelming pursuit? The answer, it seems, was not in the eyes of the Moai staring out to sea, but in the ground beneath their feet. recent technological advances have finally allowed us to start asking that question of the Earth itself. Using non-invasive tools like ground-penetrating radar and electrical resistivity tomography, archaeologists have begun to peer into the island's subsurface without lifting a single shovel. What they are finding is revolutionizing our understanding of Rapa Nui. The scans reveal that many of the Ahu platforms are not simple stone altars. They are massive, complex structures with deep foundations and, most intriguingly, what appear to be internal chambers and tunnel-like features running beneath them. These are not natural geological formations. Their linear, purposeful shapes suggest they are man-made, hidden spaces deliberately constructed and then sealed away. This discovery shatters the old image of the Moai as lonely sentinels. It suggests that the statues we see are merely the tip of a spiritual iceberg, the most public part of a sacred complex that extended deep into the earth, into a hidden world of ritual that has been lost for centuries. This subterranean dimension makes perfect sense when viewed through the lens of Rapa Nui's core spiritual belief that the island itself was a living body. The Rapa Nui people saw their land not as a territory but as an ancestor. They believed themselves to be the direct descendants of the original discoverer, Hatu Matar, and every rock, hill, and cave was imbued with ancestral presence or mana. This mana was not a vague concept. It was a tangible spiritual power that flowed through the land and through people, a force that ensured fertility, abundance, and protection. The Moai were not just representations of ancestors. They were vessels designed to contain and focus this mana. They were the physical faces of the ancestors, placed on the coast to watch over the living and channel benevolent power into the community. But if the Moai were the receivers and transmitters of this energy, then the tunnels and chambers beneath them were likely the sacred generators. They may have served as the repositories for the actual physical remains of the honored ancestors, their bones, creating a direct physical link between the statue above and the spirit it represented. This would align with Polynesian traditions across the Pacific, where burial caves and hidden ossuaries were considered intensely sacred tapas, places where the veil between the living and the dead was at its thinnest. These underground spaces could have served multiple, profound ritual purposes. They might have been used for secret initiation ceremonies, where young men would descend into the symbolic womb of the earth to commune with the ancestors and emerge as full members of the community, infused with the mana of their forebears. They could have been storage places for sacred objects of immense power, carved staffs, sacred stones, or wooden tablets inscribed with the Rongorongo script, the island's lost written language. The tunnels themselves might have formed a ceremonial pathway, allowing priests to move unseen between different Ahu during rituals, perhaps reenacting the journey of the ancestors from the underworld to the world of the living. This changes the entire scale of Rapa Nui spirituality from a series of isolated coastal monuments to a potentially interconnected sacred landscape, with a hidden, subterranean network binding the island together in a way we never before imagined. The drive to create this incredible spiritual architecture takes on a new, more sympathetic light when considered as a response to extreme environmental and social pressure. As the island's ecosystem became more fragile and resources grew scarce, the need to secure ancestral favor would have become more desperate, not less. The construction of the Moai and their hidden underground complexes was not the cause of the collapse. It was the civilization's monumental attempt to prevent it. By pouring their energy into these projects, they were not blindly marching toward ruin. They were performing the most logical act they knew, appealing to the ultimate source of power and life in their universe to intervene. They were building their way out of a crisis with the only tools they believed could work: stone, ceremony, and an unwavering faith that their ancestors would provide. The discovery of these tunnels does not just add a new chapter to the story of Easter Island. It demands we rewrite the entire book, understanding this isolated culture not as a case study in folly, but as a resilient, ingenious, and spiritually profound people who dug deep into the soul of their island, seeking salvation in the sacred dark. Beneath the magnificent dome of St. Paul's Cathedral, an icon of London's skyline and a symbol of British resilience, lies a world that is both grand and deeply intimate, the extensive crypts that form the cathedral's foundational heart. While the eyes of visitors above are drawn upward to the soaring arches and glittering mosaics, the true, enduring weight of history is felt in the quiet, lamp-lit corridors below. This is not a dark or mournful place, but a serene and purposeful underworld, a carefully curated national archive in stone and bone that holds the remains of Britain's most celebrated heroes, artists, and thinkers. From the tomb of Admiral Lord Nelson, who saved the nation at Trafalgar, to the final resting place of Sir Christopher Wren himself, the genius who designed this very edifice, the crypt is a roll call of British identity. Yet it is also a space of profound personal quietude, where the distant murmur of the city fades away, replaced by the palpable presence of centuries of prayer and remembrance. The architectural experience of descending into the crypt is a masterful lesson in the Anglican ethos, a faith that has long sought to balance majestic ceremony with accessible, personal devotion. The journey begins not with a steep, hidden staircase, but with a gradual, almost inviting descent from the main floor of the cathedral. The Baroque grandeur does not cease at the threshold, it simply transforms. Instead of vast, open space, the grandeur is channeled into the sheer scale of the burial chambers, with their robust, elegant vaulting and dignified aisles. Yet, woven into this formal layout are intimate, shadowy corners, small chapels set apart for private prayer, and quiet alcoves with simple stone benches for solitary reflection. This deliberate design allows for both the thunderous, echoing processions of a state funeral and the whispered, private conversation between a single soul and its God. It physically embodies the Church of England's historical role as a broad church, a national institution meant to accommodate the spiritual needs of everyone from the monarch to the common citizen, all within the same sacred embrace. This duality of purpose has allowed the crypt to serve functions far beyond simple interment. During the darkest days of the Second World War, when the Blitz rained fire upon London, the crypt of St. Paul's became a vital bomb shelter and a secret command center. While the nation held its breath, praying for the dome to survive, life and strategy pulsed in the chambers below. Cots were set up between the tombs of long-dead poets, and Winston Churchill himself was rumored to have held clandestine meetings in its most secure recesses, using the sacred, hallowed ground as a bastion from which to direct the war effort. This transformation from a place of eternal rest to a center for defending the living is a powerful testament to the adaptability of sacred spaces. It shows how belief is not separate from the gritty realities of history, but is often the very foundation upon which a society chooses to take its stand, drawing strength from the memory of those who built the nation now under threat. Perhaps the most fascinating feature that blurs the line between the public and the personal is the famous Whispering Gallery, which, while not in the crypt proper, acts as an auditory bridge between the two worlds. This circular gallery high inside the dome possesses a unique acoustic phenomenon where a whisper spoken against its wall can be heard clearly on the opposite side, over 100 feet away. While often a source of delight for tourists, this feature was an intentional architectural marvel by Wren. It creates an almost magical, intimate connection across a vast public space, a metaphor for how the divine can feel personally close even within the context of a vast, impersonal universe. The whisper that travels the curve of the dome finds its echo in the quiet prayers that have traveled through the crypt for centuries, each a private thought amplified within a grander design. From the triumphant monuments to national heroes to the simple, worn stones marking the graves of lesser-known individuals, every element in the crypt contributes to a layered narrative. It is a story of a nation's faith in itself, its reverence for its past, and its enduring hope for the future, all memorialized in the cool, steadfast silence beneath the bustling modern city. High atop the sun-baked hills of Granada, the Alhambra Palace complex stands as a breathtaking mirage of intricate arches, serene courtyards, and whispering fountains, a final, glorious testament to the sophistication of Islamic rule in medieval Spain. Yet for all its breathtaking beauty above ground, the true lifeblood of this paradise, its hidden heart and soul, flows through a secret network of tunnels and channels carved deep within the earth. This subterranean system is far more than a feat of medieval engineering. It is a physical manifestation of a profound spiritual philosophy, where the most practical necessity, water, was understood to be the ultimate divine gift, a sacred symbol of life, purity, and God's boundless mercy. To walk through the Alhambra is to experience a masterpiece. To understand its hidden veins is to comprehend the very essence of Islamic sacred art. The genius of the Nasrid engineers who built this system in the 13th and 14th centuries is staggering in its precision and foresight. They began their work miles away, high in the snow-capped peaks of the Sierra Nevada, capturing meltwater from the mountains and channeling it through a complex network of aqueducts known as acequias. These channels guided the water directly to the base of the Alhambra Hill, where the real magic began. From there, a masterfully planned labyrinth of underground tunnels, some wide enough to walk through, others narrow conduits just for water, took over. Using only gravity, they propelled this precious resource up and into the palace complex itself, a counterintuitive feat that must have seemed like a miracle. The water was then distributed with exquisite precision to every corner of the citadel, to the massive storage cisterns that guaranteed the city's survival during a siege, to the humble baths for ritual purification, and most gloriously, to the countless fountains and irrigation channels that fed the general life gardens. The entire system was a hidden, ticking clockwork of hydrological perfection, all functioning silently and invisibly beneath the feet of the sultans, courtiers, and poets who enjoyed its bounty. But in the Islamic world, and particularly in the arid landscape of Andalusia, water was never seen as just a physical resource. It was the central metaphor for divine grace and the promise of paradise. The Quran describes the gardens of paradise, or Jannah, as a place where rivers flow beneath shaded pavilions, a reward for the righteous. The designers of the Alhambra took this celestial blueprint and made it earthly reality. Every element of the water's journey was infused with spiritual meaning. The fountains were not mere ornaments. Their continuous, gentle murmur was a constant auditory reminder of God's presence and generosity, a sound meant to soothe the soul and inspire contemplation. The long, narrow reflection pools that stretched through the courtyards were designed to act as mirrors, perfectly capturing the image of the elegant arches and ornate stucco work above, symbolizing the reflection of the heavenly realm in the earthly one. Even the act of channeling water underground was deeply symbolic, representing the hidden or batin dimension of existence, the divine reality that flows beneath the surface of the visible world. This connection to hidden knowledge suggests another, more esoteric purpose for these secluded passageways. While their primary function was hydraulic, their design quiet, cool, and removed from the bustling court, would have made them ideal for the private, mystical practices of Sufism. Sufism, the inner mystical dimension of Islam, emphasizes direct personal experience of the divine through practices like meditation, chanting, and introspection. The quiet, rhythmic drip of water in the darkness, the feeling of being enveloped by the earth, the sense of being within the very machinery that sustains life above, all of this would have created a powerful environment for a Sufi seeker to disconnect from worldly distractions and turn inward. It is not difficult to imagine a Sufi mystic using these solitary tunnels for spiritual retreat or khalwa, their prayers mingling with the sound of the flowing water, seeking a state of unity with the divine source that the water itself represented. The tunnels in this light become more than service corridors. They become potential pathways for the soul's journey toward God. This perfect fusion of function and form, of engineering and art, is the defining characteristic of the Alhambra and of classical Islamic architecture as a whole. The same intellect that calculated the precise gradient needed to make water flow uphill was also devoted to inscribing the walls with breathtaking calligraphy of Quranic verses and complex, endlessly repeating geometric patterns. These patterns, which adorn not just the palaces but even the functional elements like fountain spouts and channel grates, are themselves a spiritual language. Their infinite repetition without beginning or end symbolizes the infinite and unchanging nature of God, while the complex geometries demonstrate the underlying order and intelligence of Allah's creation. There is no division between the sacred and the practical. The act of ensuring a city had water was itself a sacred act, and the tools for doing so were made beautiful as an act of devotion. The Alhambra's hidden network is the ultimate expression of this holistic worldview, a place where one cannot separate the engineer from the artist, or the artisan from the mystic, because they all worked in harmonious concert to create an environment that was both a fortress for the body and a paradise for the soul. Now we arrive at our final passageway, a discovery so fresh it is still breathing the dust of centuries, offering us a powerful closing chapter on the theme of spiritual convergence. On the windswept Mediterranean coast of Egypt, not far from the great city of Alexandria, lie the sun-bleached ruins of Tappasirous Magna, a city whose name literally means the great tomb of Osiris. For years, this site was a puzzle, a place of obvious importance hinted at in ancient texts but whose full story remained stubbornly buried. That changed when archaeologists, using ground-penetrating radar, detected the unmistakable signature of a vast subterranean network running directly beneath the temple precincts. The excavation that followed has begun to reveal a stunning time capsule from the Hellenistic period, a moment in history when two of the ancient world's greatest civilizations, Egypt and Greece, met, mingled, and created an entirely new spiritual language deep within the earth. The artifacts emerging from these damp, sand-choked tunnels are an archaeologist's dream, each one a direct testament to the fascinating religious alchemy of the Ptolemaic era. As you brush away the soil, you might find a beautifully carved statue of the Egyptian god Osiris, lord of the underworld and god of resurrection, depicted in his classic mummified form. But right beside it, you could uncover a votive offering left at a small altar, not to an Egyptian deity, but to the Greek god Dionysus, the ecstatic god of wine, fertility, and theater. To the untrained eye, this seems like a confused jumble, but to the people of Tappasirous Magna, this made perfect sense. They saw a profound connection between these two gods. Both Osiris and Dionysus were deities who suffered a violent death, were dismembered, and were then miraculously reborn. Both were intimately associated with the life-giving forces of the earth. Osiris with the annual flooding of the Nile that brought fertility to the land, and Dionysus with the vine that bursts forth from the earth to produce wine. In the dim light of these underground passageways, they were not two different gods. They were two names, two cultural expressions for the same universal force of death and rebirth. This is syncretism in its most potent form, not the mere placing of gods side by side, but the creation of a new hybrid divinity, a fusion that answered the spiritual needs of a newly mixed Greco-Egyptian population. The design of the tunnels themselves suggests they were far more than storage areas or simple corridors. Their layout is intentionally complex, with sudden turns, small antechambers, and niches set at specific points. This was likely the setting for powerful initiation rituals, perhaps for a mystery cult dedicated to this merged Osiris-Dionysus figure. Imagine a new initiate being led blindfolded through this confusing, subterranean labyrinth. The journey would have been designed to disorient, to symbolize the death of the old self and the descent into the underworld. Then, in a central chamber, the blindfold would be removed to reveal a dramatic ritual, a priest enacting the myth of Osiris's resurrection, or the sharing of sacred wine as the blood of Dionysus. By physically walking the path of the god through the darkness, the participant didn't just hear about transformation. They experienced it somatically, emotionally stepping into the myth itself to emerge reborn into a new state of spiritual awareness. The tunnel became a transformative landscape, a machine for achieving personal enlightenment through guided ordeal. What makes Tappasirous Magna such a perfect culmination of our journey is how it encapsulates the very purpose of these hidden sacred spaces. In the world above ground, political power might shift, languages might change, and new cultural forces might arrive with conquering armies. But underground, in the quiet, permanent dark, the old and the new could meet on different terms. The earth provided a neutral, protected workshop where beliefs could be taken apart, compared, and reassembled into new, more powerful configurations without the pressure of public scrutiny or orthodoxy. The tunnels beneath Tappasirous Magna were a spiritual laboratory, a place where Egyptian priests and Greek philosophers could literally go beneath the surface of their differences to discover the common theological ground that lay beneath. This underground innovation didn't weaken their faith. It strengthened and renewed it, creating a vibrant, resilient belief system that could speak to a changing world. In the end, this 27th passageway offers a hopeful metaphor for humanity itself. It shows us that even when cultures collide on the surface with noise and conflict, the deep, human search for meaning can often find a way to blend, adapt, and create something beautifully new in the silent, sacred spaces below. What unites these 27 sites, scattered across continents and millennia, is a profound and recurring human impulse to turn inward and downward in the pursuit of the sacred. It's a pattern that reveals itself not through coincidence, but through a set of universal themes that surface again and again, as if carved from the same bedrock of human consciousness. The first and most immediate is the theme of protection. From the Christians vanishing into the depths of Derinkuyu to the early priests sealing the crypts of Dendera, the underground has always offered a literal and psychological fortress. It is a retreat from persecution, from the chaos of invasion, or simply from the distracting noise of the everyday world. This drive for security is powerfully intertwined with the need for secrecy. These hidden chambers were not just for hiding people, they were for safeguarding knowledge. The intricate rituals of the Egyptian priesthood, the esoteric initiation rites of the Mithras cult, the meditative practices of Buddhist monks, all required a space set apart, accessible only to the initiated. This secrecy wasn't about elitism for its own sake. It was about preserving the potency and purity of experiences believed to be too powerful, too transformative for the unprepared. The darkness itself became a veil, separating the mundane from the mystical and ensuring that sacred mysteries remained truly mysterious. Beyond mere concealment, these passageways served as powerful engines for ritual intensity. The very act of descending changes you. Leaving the familiar world of light and open air behind creates a natural sense of anticipation and focus. In the cramped, airless silence of the Kukai tunnels, a simple altar became a lifeline to sanity. In the echoing oracle room of the Hypogeum, a chant became a voice from the underworld. The environment itself, the weight of the earth, the limited air, the absolute darkness heightens the senses and focuses the mind, making participants more receptive to spiritual revelation. This carefully manufactured atmosphere was often designed to facilitate a symbolic journey, perhaps the most beautiful theme of all. The physical path through a winding tunnel becomes a metaphor for the soul's voyage, from life into death, from ignorance to enlightenment, from the profane world to the sacred center. Walking the sick in Petra builds awe before the final reveal. Descending into the tomb at Newgrange on the solstice is to walk into the womb of the earth to be reborn with the sun. These are not just corridors, they are narrative pathways guiding the participant through a story in which they are the protagonist, emerging on the other side fundamentally changed. Furthermore, the astonishing recurrence of specific symbolic elements points to a shared human vocabulary of the sacred. The precise astronomical alignments found from Ireland to Mexico reveal a universal obsession with cosmos and time. Ancient builders went to incredible lengths to literally anchor their sacred spaces to the movements of the sun, moon, and stars, weaving their rituals into the very fabric of the universe. This celestial order is perfectly mirrored by the earthly focus on water. In the parched landscapes of Petra and Teotihuacan, the intricate hydraulic systems were feats of survival, but they were also acts of devotion. Water, the source of all life, was worshipped as a divine gift, and controlling it underground was seen as a form of communion with the gods of the deep earth. And everywhere in the darkness we find art, from the magnificent frescoes of Dambulla to the carved skulls of Sedlec. Humanity has an irrepressible need to create beauty, even in the face of death. This artistic expression transforms functional spaces into meaning-filled ones, using visual language to teach, to inspire awe, and to connect the human spirit to the divine. Ultimately, studying these spaces shows us that religions are not static monoliths. They are dynamic, adaptive systems. They respond to environmental pressures, like the communities in Cappadocia digging to survive, or the Rapa Nui people building moai to plead for ecological balance. They adapt to social challenges, as seen in the early Christians of Rome building their basilicas over Mithraic temples to claim spiritual territory, or the religious blending so evident in the catacombs of Alexandria. In every case, the core values the need to connect with the divine, to honor ancestors, to understand death remain constant, but the forms they take, the architecture they inspire, and the rituals they foster are endlessly innovative. This incredible diversity of expression, all united by common human yearnings, is the true gift of these 27 passageways. They remind us that while our beliefs may be expressed in different languages and different stones, the desire to find meaning, to seek protection, and to touch the eternal is a journey we have all chosen to make, often by stepping out of the light and into the revealing dark. From the echoing oracle chambers of Malta's Hypogeum to the sun-drenched Hellenistic tunnels of Tappasirous Magna, our journey through these 27 hidden worlds has revealed a profound and universal truth, that humanity's deepest spiritual impulses have always found powerful expression in the sacred dark. Each passageway, from the vast cities of Cappadocia to the intimate catacomb chapels of Rome, tells a unique story of innovation, resilience, and a devotion so profound that it moved generations to carve their faith directly into the living rock. These are not mere holes in the ground. They are libraries of belief, archives of ritual, and timeless maps of the human soul's quest for meaning. They show us that across every continent and culture, people have felt the need to descend, to seek seclusion, and to create spaces where the mysteries of life, death, and the divine could be confronted with unwavering focus and awe. What these sites ultimately challenge is our very definition of sacred space. We often imagine temples as structures that reach for the heavens, their spires and domes pointing toward the divine. But this journey reminds us that the sacred is just as often found in the opposite direction, in the humble, inward and downward dive into the earth, the womb of the world itself. This isn't about turning away from the light, but about seeking a different kind of illumination, one that is found in the quiet dark, away from the distractions of the surface. It is in these spaces that we find the most intimate and resilient expressions of faith, the whispered prayers of early Christians in Derinkuyu, the ecstatic chants of Mayan priests in Balanchay, the meditative silence of Buddhist monks in Dambulla. These hidden acts of devotion were the sustaining engines for entire civilizations, the quiet heartbeat beneath the noisy march of history. As we surface from this exploration, we are left with a compelling invitation to look at our own world differently. These passageways remind us that history is rarely just what we see on the surface. The most profound truths are often buried, waiting for a curious mind, a new technology, or a fresh perspective to reveal them. They encourage us to consider what lies beneath our own everyday awareness, the traditions, stories, and unconscious beliefs that shape our lives from the shadows. Just as the builders of Newgrange aligned their tomb with the cosmos, or the priests of Dendera channeled starlight into their crypts, we too are guided by forces both seen and unseen, by histories we walk over every day without ever knowing they are there. This journey through the depths is more than a catalogue of ancient wonders. It is a mirror reflecting our own enduring search for connection and understanding. It shows us that the human spirit, when faced with mystery, does not shy away. It digs, it delves, and it creates breathtaking beauty even in the darkest places. These 27 passageways are a testament to that irrepressible creativity and faith. Thank you for joining this expedition into the profound and the hidden. If these stories from the depths have illuminated something for you, please share your thoughts in the comments below and consider liking and subscribing to join us on our next journey into the wonders of our world.